Yeah, we are live.
Welcome, Zindabad, Jai Bhim and Satrangi Salam to all of you from National Alliance of People's Movements. आज हम पीपल्स मूवमेंट के नेशनल अलायंस ऑफ जन आंदोलनों के राष्ट्रीय समन्वय के ग्राउंडेड वॉइसेस सीरीज में आप सबका स्वागत है. We welcome all of you in the Grounded Voices series of National Alliance of People's Movement. ये हमारी 50 के ऊपर की सीरीज में 58 में एक्चुअली हम गए 2 साल से सीरीज चला रहे हैं to capture the voices from the ground, from the people's struggle to all over which are happening all over India, the issues which are touching our life and the struggles and the challenges which are being moved by the people. The effort is to get the people from the working on the ground, find out the issues and find out a collective way forward to strengthen our resolve and a collective struggle ahead. Today, as we stand on the border where when the 26th January is very close by, our heart is heavy, where we know that what is happening with our friends in Kashmir, what has happened and what sort of a massacre which has happened in Naga, we still have to come out of it. We know what is the way the military and the army and cobras have taken up the Chhattisgarh. These are the many conflict regions, and we know how the autonomy, the special status of the regions have been all eroded by the present government. It's not only the present government, the policies of the government of India over the years, which has actually brought up to this situation where the whole bogey of nationalism has actually murdering the people, killing their ambitions, killing their lives, and killing the dreams. We have today, in this series, which is the last and fourth chapter of the series of looking back and looking beyond forward, is the one of the last series today. In the first 3 parts, we covered the issues which had affected all of us in last 2 years, specifically, which are the health and nutrition, livelihood, labor, agriculture, the issues of Dalit rights, Adivasi rights, the issues of the judicial accountability, the overarching framework of federalism, I think, which many of you will like to talk about, the whole issue of the citizenship right, of the assault on minorities, the issues of trans-person rights, and many other. Today, we will be talking about the issues of the regions. We'll be hearing our comrades and our friends from regions of Kashmir, from Nagaland, and from Chhattisgarh. Today, the session will be moderated by Vijayan MJ, who is first and foremost a very dear friend, a research analyst and activist. He is an independent researcher, a writer associated with the Research Collective and the Center for Financial Accountability in New Delhi. He is also the General Secretary of India.
Did we lose Arundhati?
Yeah, I think so. She has dropped out. She was anyway on my intro.
Come and
so
speak, and also the the many people and friends and people we are seeing in the audience. Thank you, and over to you, Vijay.
Thank you very much, Arundhati, and warm thanks to all the comrades of NAPM. NAPM के सभी साथियों को धन्यवाद और सभी को जोहार, जय भीम, लाल सलाम, इनकलाब जिंदाबाद, अस्सलाम. This is a very important session, and to many of us, it's something that we had been looking forward to. एक तो ये कि कोविड के माहौल में हम लोग जब एक तो काम, आजीविका, बहुत सारी चीजों का एकदम अटक जाता है, and that has been how life has been over the past 2 years. Some of the issues that are not immediately in front of us, often we either end up looking over and not being able to look at them closely and follow those issues closely. And जैसे हम लोगों को realization हो रहा है, सरकारों को इसका बहुत फायदा मिल रहा है, चाहे वो नागा पीस प्रोसेस का मामला हो, चाहे वो बस्तर का आदिवासी दमन का मामला हो, चाहे वो कश्मीर के ऊपर जो 2019 से लेके एक नया किस्म का एक नया दमन और एक नया आतंक जो सरकारी तौर पे जो शुरू हुआ है उसको लेके हो. In both senses, I think governments have benefited immensely from the pandemic, unfortunately, and they have made use of the pandemic in ways where it is very easily used as to strengthen anti-people measures and keep us apart. Conflict zones in South Asia, Indian subcontinent, have been one of those, and I'm very, very grateful to NAPM for having stepped forward, come forward, and made the reassurance, especially to the people of the region, by making sure that today we are talking about these issues in the looking back, looking forward last session of the 4-part series of the NAPM Grounded Voices sessions this time. People's struggles of 2021, how we look forward to them in 2022. जन आंदोलनों का जो 2021 से लेके आगे आने वाले 2022 का समय को लेते हुए NAPM का जो एक कोशिश है, उसमें कॉन्फ्लिक्ट के मुद्दों को, द्वंद्व जहाँ पे मिलिटराइज रूप में सेना विन्यास के रूप में जो बदल जाता है, जहाँ पे सिविल लाइफ खत्म हो जाता है और जहाँ मिलिट्री या आर्मी या पुलिस एक पुलिस स्टेट, मिलिट्री स्टेट बनाता है, जैसे नागालैंड में हो या नागा एरियाज में हो तमाम, और कश्मीर में हो या फिर बस्तर छत्तीसगढ़ में हो. तो आज का सेशन एक कोशिश है एक नए ढंग से बातचीत शुरू करने के लिए. मैं विजयन, पाकिस्तान इंडिया पीपल्स फोरम से आज हमारे साथ जो साथी जुड़े हुए हैं, बहुत अहम साथी है. उनका सिर्फ परिचय, बहुत डिटेल परिचय उनका बातचीत से पहले हम कराएंगे, लेकिन उसका सिर्फ एक परिचय देते हुए शुरू करते हैं. I will quickly introduce the 4 speakers we have. Let me start with the first speaker of the day, which is Professor Rosemary. Rosemary is a very, very dear friend, a versatile woman leader and academic from the Naga areas. Rosemary has been very closely associated with the Naga Mothers Association and has been a peacemaker in the region for very many years. And she has also been someone who is as young as a young activist can be, because of the fact that she has been very deeply involved with the youth groups and youth organizations too. And that's where she derives her energies from, as I believe. We have a speaker from Kashmir. Rosemary ji Naga areas se hai. जब मैं नागा एरियाज बोलता हूँ, उसका मतलब यह है कि नागालैंड के बाहर जो 3 राज्यों में और बर्मा में जो नागा इलाके हैं, नागा समाज का, नागा ट्राइब के साथी लोग जहाँ रहते हैं, उनको नागा एरियाज बोलते हैं हम लोग. तो नागालैंड सिर्फ नागा एरिया नहीं है. मणिपुर में नागा एरियाज है, अरुणाचल प्रदेश में नागा एरियाज है, असम में नागा एरियाज है, और बर्मा में, म्यांमार में नागा एरियाज है, नागा डिस्ट्रिक्ट्स है. तो नागा कम्युनिटी ये सब इलाकों में बटा गया एक समाज है. तो हम नागालैंड से ज्यादा नागा इलाका बोलना पसंद करेंगे. I would prefer to use the term Naga areas than using Nagaland. Nagalim is the language that is used by the Naga comrades usually. रोजमेरी के साथ कश्मीर से जो हमारा साथी है, वो एक पब्लिक हेल्थ वर्कर है कश्मीर में. उनका अपना नाम यहाँ पे ना देने का या एनोनिमस रहने का पीछे सिर्फ स्टेट टेरर का डर नहीं है, वो मैं बोलते हुए शुरू करना चाहता हूँ. उनका एक नजरिया ये है कि हर कश्मीरी एक जैसा ही है. हम सब यहाँ इस हालत में इसलिए है क्योंकि हम कश्मीरी हैं. तो कश्मीरी ए हो, कश्मीरी बी हो, कश्मीरी सी हो, मेरा नाम अकबर हो, अमर हो, एंटनी हो, कोई फर्क नहीं पड़ रहा है. हम लोग सब एक ही हालात में हैं. तो हमारा नाम से कोई लेना देना नहीं है, हमारा चेहरों से कोई लेना देना नहीं है. और ये सच्चाई हम बताना चाहते हैं दुनिया को, शायद इसलिए भी वो एनोनिमस रहना चाहता है. बहुत अहम साथी हैं, नौजवान साथियों के एक पूरा पीढ़ी जो हिंसा के साथ, हिंसा को देखते हुए और हैरान, निराशाजनक हिंसा को देखते हुए भी बड़ा होने का एक जरूरत पड़ा है, एक मजबूरी पड़ा है एक पीढ़ी को कश्मीर में. उस पीढ़ी को रिप्रेजेंट करता है वो साथी. स्वागत है आपका. बेला जी को मेरे ख्याल से एनएपीएम का एक मंच में परिचय देने का मेरा हिम्मत नहीं होना चाहिए, क्योंकि बेला जी हमसे ज्यादा सीनियर सिविल राइट्स मूवमेंट में एक अभी तो वकील के रूप में भी है, लेकिन सिविल राइट्स मूवमेंट में एक एकेडमिक के रूप में, एक लेखिका के रूप में, एक महिला आंदोलन का साथी के रूप में रही साथी है। बस्तर में रहती है अभी और छत्तीसगढ़ के मुद्दों को लेके खास करके आदिवासी समाज के खिलाफ जो होने वाला हिंसा के मुद्दों को लेते हुए लड़ने वाला एक साथी है। बेला जी, स्वागत है आपका। और प्रोफेसर सिद्दीक वाहिद साहब पाकिस्तान इंडिया पीपल्स फोरम में हमारे लिए बहुत हमारा एक वरिष्ठ साथी है। कश्मीर लद्दाख से, जम्मू कश्मीर का लद्दाख रीजन से बिलोंग करता है और आज यहाँ पे वो सिर्फ एक कश्मीरी के रूप में नहीं है, वो कश्मीरी यूनिवर्सिटी, इस्लामिक यूनिवर्सिटी साइंस एंड टेक्नोलॉजी वगैरह का फाउंडिंग वाइस चांसलर है, बहुत वरिष्ठ एकेडमिक साथी भी है, लेखक खुद है, एक इतिहासकार है। लेकिन आज वो हमारे साथ सिर्फ कश्मीर का मत रखने के लिए नहीं, लेकिन ये जो द्वंद्व का मुद्दे जो आज का हमारा मुख्य एक नजरिया ये भी है कि हाउ इज इट दैट द कॉन्फ्लिक्ट्स दैट वी आर टॉकिंग अबाउट are not only not integrating the nation but actually ending up losing the people. हम इस राष्ट्र का निर्माण के प्रक्रिया में, जो राष्ट्र को निर्माण करने के लिए ये द्वंद्व है, या जिन इलाकों को पकड़ के रखने के लिए, ऑक्यूपाई करके रखने के लिए जो द्वंद्व या मिलिटराइजेशन का हम इस्तेमाल करते हैं, उससे हम इस राष्ट्र को या इस देश को भी अपना रहा है कि लोगों को गवा रहा है। इस मुद्दे को लेके कुछ नजर डालने के लिए, अपना एक पर्सपेक्टिव नजरिया बताने के लिए भी सिद्दीक साहब आज हमारे साथ है। तो मैं बिना देरी का शुरू करना चाहता हूं। सभी साथियों को फिर से जिंदाबाद। सत्र हम चाहते हैं कि ज्यादातर इंग्लिश हिंदी दोनों भाषा में रहें, क्योंकि वी हैव ऑडियंस फ्रॉम बोथ इंग्लिश एंड हिंदी, सो वी वुड इंटेंड टू कीप the session in as bilingual. However, we have at least 3 of our speakers who are going to be speaking in English. So I will try to provide some sort of brief summaries at the end of their conversations and the end of their sharing in Hindi. Bela will actually be making an effort to be in bilingual and speak in Hindi too. So if there is more Hindi, then I will try to sum up, or Bela herself can speak a few words in English and make sure that the English audience also are able to follow. There are both categories. There are people who strictly understand only English, and then there are people who strictly understand only Hindustani or Hindi. So सभी साथियों को फिर से स्वागत है। हम शुरू करते हैं। मैं चाहता हूं कि इस चर्चा का एक फॉर्मेट ऐसे रहे कि साथी, हमारे चारों साथी लोग शुरुआत करते हुए अपना एक बातचीत 5 मिनट में रखेंगे, और अगर मैं रोजमेरी जी से जब शुरू कर रही हूँ, उनका 5 मिनट का बातचीत के बाद मैं एक कुछ सवालों के साथ उनके साथ एक प्रश्न सवाल जवाब का प्रक्रिया में एक डिस्कशन के तौर पे इस चर्चा को चलाना चाहूंगा। और उसके बाद रोजमेरी जी का 20 मिनट का चर्चा के बाद हम अगला वक्ता के पास जाएंगे। चारों वक्ताओं का ये जो ठोस बातचीत या उनका मन में जो दिशा में बात करना चाह रहा है, वो बात खत्म करने के बाद हम लोग एक खुला चर्चे में जाने का प्रयास करेंगे। अभी 6:23 हुआ है, it's 6:23 now. The format of the discussion is that I will be requesting all the speakers one after the other. First they will speak for 5 minutes, then I will be engaging in a question and answer kind of a discussion format with them for about 15 minutes each. And so that means about 20 minutes per speaker. And so at the end of the conversation, by the design, we will get into a question and answer open discussion session with all of them, where all of you are free to ask your questions. Rosemary ji, aapse shuru karte hain. And once again, welcome to the session. You have been for very long involved with the human rights movement. The Naga people's movement for human rights is one of the pioneering human rights movements in South Asia itself, much ahead of many of the other civil liberties and human rights organizations. You have been associated with the Naga Mothers Association, an apex body of women in the state, as its leader, its chief, and now an advisor. You have played a very significant role as a peacemaker in the conflict and in political empowerment of people. Thank you very much for joining us today. And I'm very happy that I'm able to have this conversation with you. Over to you, Rosemary. So you have 5 minutes for your opening remarks.
Thank you, Vijayan, and really grateful to the National Alliance of People's Movement for the invitation this evening. It's a rare opportunity, especially for many of us from the region, particularly in Nagaland, to be sharing our story. But for those of you who live in India, perhaps you have been hearing a lot about the Nagas, the Naga movement, and the struggle that we have gone through for the last many decades. I come from a region where we are still looking at the future and looking at what has happened in the last 1 year. We are still in the process of peace. We have an ongoing long process of 20 plus years of the peace process, which is still ongoing and has hit a number of roadblocks between the negotiating parties, which is the government of India, and one of the main negotiating groups, the National Council, the NSE and IM. And just last December, we have seen the killings of 14 innocent civilians in a district in Nagaland, which actually has grabbed not only national attention, but also international attention as far as violating human rights and killing of civilians is concerned. But this is nothing new for the Naga areas. The Nagas who live in different parts of the Indian state, which is Nagaland itself, the hills of Manipur, the Rengma Hills in Assam, the Zeme Hills in North Kachar, and the 3 districts in Arunachal, including the Nagas in Myanmar, a large segment of the Nagas who live in Myanmar. We have been struggling for so many decades since the early 50s. In fact, if you look back into our history, Nagas have actually declared their independence a day ahead of the Indian Declaration of Independence. So the movement that we are looking at in Nagaland is actually purely a political movement, and in the Naga areas, a political movement for a common homeland and a vision that one day we should be able to settle together. And it is within this paradox of a nation trying to build a nation together and integrate all of us as Indians and as a part of India, and this periphery of the nation, of the Naga areas, which see themselves separately and actually who have been struggling for independence and self-determination at this point in time. We have, as women and as civil activists, on one side, we have this draconian law, which is the Armed Forces Special Powers Act, which I think Kashmir would know very well, besides the Northeast Friends. The Armed Forces Special Powers Act was an act which was passed actually in 1958, particularly to handle the Naga movement, and it continues till today. And the last killing that we had on the 4th and 5th of December 2021 actually points out to the kind of suffering the Nagas have had and faced over all these decades, where there's complete impunity with which the AFSPA is used and complete immunity for the Indian Armed Forces. So it is within this, the dynamics of a peace process, a militarized region, and people longing for peace, and at the same time also having very, very, very regressive laws, I would say, when you look at the Citizenship Amendment Bill, which erupted also in the region. We already have questions of illegal immigrants, and then to be swamped by people who are coming from outside. Also, identification of citizens who are going to be made citizens according to religion. So I think, and Hinduism, for that matter, is something alien to us, and therefore it is within such a context of, the the Voices for a Uniform Civil Code, for Citizenship Amendment Bill, and then the RIN. There are a lot of issues where the government of India is trying to integrate people, but I think the beauty of India is actually this diversity. And the minute we forget the diversity, I think that is where we are going to see the problems which have been erupting for so long.
Thank you, Rosemary. That was indeed exactly 5 minutes. Less than that, actually. रोसमेरी जी ने जो बात रखा उसको सिर्फ कुछ शब्दों में रखने की प्रयास कर रहा हूँ। एक तो जो मानवाधिकार का हनन का मामला या जो हिंसा का मामला है नागा इलाकों में, उसका एक इतिहास है। जैसे आप देखेंगे 1958 में जो आर्म फोर्सेस स्पेशल पावर्स एक्ट, आफ्सपा हम लोग जो बोलते हैं, तमाम लोग वो जानते होंगे, जो आर्मी को, सेना को अहम ताकतें देते हुए और लोग सिविलियंस नागरिकों के ऊपर गोली चलाने का हक देते हुए जो एक एक्ट है इंडियन पार्लियामेंट का, भारतीय संसद का, वो 1958 से जो चल रहा है वो बनाया ही नागा इलाकों का आंदोलन को उनके खिलाफ इस्तेमाल करने के लिए रहा है। और तमाम नागा इलाकों में, खास करके भारत में जो नागा इलाके हैं चारों राज्यों में, इन चारों राज्यों में वो इस्तेमाल किए गए हैं डिस्टर्बरी एक्ट के साथ। तो ये जो लड़ाई है एक आजादी का लड़ाई रहा है, एक सेल्फ डिटर्मिनेशन का, एक खुद का भविष्य तय करने के लिए लोगों का जो हक है, जो कोई भी लोकतंत्र में एक अहम हक है, उसको लेके रहा है। उसका इस आंदोलन का इतिहास 1947 से पहले से चलता है, जब अगस्त 14 तारीख को 1947 में नागा समाज को ये बोला गया था कि उनका आजादी हो गया है, और हम भी पाकिस्तान के साथ अगस्त 14 को अपना नागा आजादी का दिवस मनाते हैं। लेकिन हमारे इलाकों में जब आप दिसंबर का हिंसा को अगर देखेंगे, दिसंबर 4 और 5 तारीख को मॉन डिस्ट्रिक्ट में जो हुआ है, वोटिंग इलाके में जो हुआ है, उसको अगर देखेंगे तो इसके पीछे एक इतिहास है जो लगातार नागा इलाकों में एक हिंसा होके आया है, उसका एक इतिहास इसके पीछे आपको दिखाई देगा। लेकिन इस रीजन को, पूरा इलाके को, अगर नागालैंड के नागा इलाकों के बाहर भी अगर आप देखेंगे तो सीए का मामला हो, एनआरसी का मामला हो, ये सब इस नॉर्थ ईस्ट, जिसको आप उत्तर पूर्वी देश मानते हैं भारत के, उस इलाकों में से शुरू होता है। क्योंकि यहाँ पे ये वो भी एक द्वंद्व देखने को मिलता है कि बाहर से लोगों को सरकार भी लाके जिस तरीके से रखते हैं समाजों के बीच में, समाजों को बांटने के लिए और उनका एक सरकार का एक हिस्सा बनाने के लिए, तो ये एक राजनीति का हिस्सा हम भी समझते हैं इस चीजों को। तो जैसे हिंदू धर्म हमारे लिए एक बाहर का धर्म है, वो हमारा इलाके का धर्म के रूप में नहीं है। लेकिन भारत भी है क्या, भारत का अस्तित्व ही उसका एक जो एक डाइवर्सिटी है, जो अलग अलग समाज भारत में है, उससे आता है, ऐसे हम विश्वास करते हैं। ये बातें बोल के रोसमेरी जी ने शुरू किया है बातचीत। Rosemary, I was just quickly translating your conversation. Thank you for the opening remarks. Just quick questions to shoot with. What has been the impact of the voting massacre, if I may ask, especially on the social psyche of the people of Naga areas and the peace process? I ask this also because, as you correctly pointed out, the Naga community has witnessed several massacres in the past. But what I saw on the 6th of December at the Nagaland House in Delhi, where we had gone to pay our tributes to the people who got, innocent people who got killed, was an absolute a community in distress, a community in mourning, a community that was wailing for the people who got killed, and that had nothing to do with the number of people who got killed or their occupation. You know, many people kept writing about how they were innocent mine workers, etc. But while the whole question was they were killed because they were Nagas. And I think, how do you look at this historically?
Vijayan, if you look at the Oting massacre, I think it has become a trigger point of again bringing Nagas together and of bringing the Northeast together, all standing against the Armed Forces Special Powers Act, an act which has actually dehumanized not only the Nagas, but also the whole region. And the Oting killings, unfortunately, till date, has seen no justice. We have not seen the armed forces, the armed personnel being, suspended. There's no news of that. There's an investigation which is ongoing by the police and the army, and Nagaland doesn't have a specialized forensic laboratory. So tests have also been sent outside. And I think this has created more grief and more injustice, because any kind of justice that is delayed is definitely justice denied. And the Oting massacre has also seen voices coming out from the Northeast, not only from Naga, voices across tribes and across the states, where everyone has come back to mourn and to question, why does a government that calls ourselves their own citizens send its army to kill us regularly like this, you know? And I think this massacre has really drawn questions also from the younger generation, which has been silent for quite some time. It has brought the Northeast together, demanding the repeal of AFSPA, and it has brought the whole Naga community across the states together, including Myanmar, if you have been following up the media reports, questioning the government of India on its silence and on, supporting the army, that actually it was a mistaken identity. You know, you do not kill so many dozens of people on a mere excuse of being a mistaken identity, and I think that is something really, really unfortunate.
Yeah, thank you, Rosemary. It's also been puzzling us in the sense of, I mean, on the one hand, the government of India keeps claiming that there is a Naga peace process, there is a ceasefire that is on since 1997, and the ceasefire has been intact, thankfully, now for 24 plus years, 25th year we have entered. However, on the other hand, there are very serious issues, including the framework agreement, the transparency of it, the accountability of government of India towards a framework agreement, etc. But before we come to that, could you just tell us, I know this is not a question for a 2-minute answer, but tell our audience about the uniqueness of the Naga struggle, if I may call it, because this is something that has been historic and that has put Naga areas as independent areas even before the British sanctioned independence to India. Where do you place this uniqueness in the history of the conflict?
You see, I think, Vijayan, the whole idea that the Nagas have been struggling for their independence is actually as old as what we can remember. The very fact that the Nagas were not actually controlled nor taken over by the British, and when they left, you already had, by 1929, you already have the Naga Club submitting the Simon Commission, the representation to the Simon Commission, saying that if you leave us, we would like to be left on our own. The Nagas would like to be left on their own. And that's one of the main reasons why by the 14th of August, 1947, you already had Nagas declaring their independence, which of course Nehru did not like. So it is with that kind of a history that there has been no loss of momentum, which has carried on till today. And I think that's a seriousness of the Naga struggle, which the government of India needs to really understand. We are not a state nor an area which has been annexed to India. And so far, that is the main reason why the struggle is going on. That is the main reason why the government of India has come into negotiations with the armed groups. And definitely, in spite of the violence, in spite of the tears, in spite of the militarization, I think we, the Naga public, including us, the women, the peacemakers, the peacekeepers, we are the ones who are actually hoping that in the midst of all this, we will find a semblance of peace.
That's interesting. साथियों, थोड़ा हिंदी में अगर इस बात को बताएं, दो मुख्य बिंदुओं पे बात हो रहे थे। जो ओटिंग में जो मैसेकर हुआ, लोगों का हत्याएं हुई दिसंबर 4 तारीख रात को और 5 तारीख को, उसको लेके हमारा सवाल ये था कि वो नागा इलाकों में तो बहुत हिंसा पहले भी हुआ है, तो इसमें क्या फर्क है। और दूसरा ये था कि जो नागा इतिहास में जो अहम चीज है, जो एकदम मुख्य चीज माना जाता है, वो क्या है, वो इतना अलग से क्यों है बाकी लड़ाइयों में। नॉर्थ ईस्ट वगैरह में हमें देखने को मिलता है कि बहुत समाजों का एक तरह का द्वंद्व चलता है, लेकिन नागा समाज का एक द्वंद्व जो भारतीय राष्ट्र के साथ जो रहा है, वो आजादी से पहले से भी रहा है, ब्रिटिशों के साथ रहा है, उसके बाद आजाद भारत के साथ भी रहा है। तो उसका एक इतिहास में एक अहमियत क्या है, हमारा सवाल था। तो उसमें जी का बोलना यह था कि आर्म फोर्सेस स्पेशल पावर्स एक्ट कर रहते हुए जिस तरीके से इस लोगों के साथ जो कभी भी हत्या कर सकता है, बहुत सालों के बाद जब पीस प्रोसेस या एक मुहिम हुआ था 1957 में, 97 में जो एक सीज फायर जहां दोनों तरफ से गोलियां नहीं चलाए जाएंगे का एग्रीमेंट जो बनाया था भारत सरकार और NSCN जो नागा आर्मी है उनके साथ, तो वो तब से लेके इस तरह का कांड नहीं होके आ रहे थे। और लेकिन बार बार ये जो हिम्मत मिलता है कि हम कभी भी मतलब नागरिकों को मार सकते हैं और उसके ऊपर कोई कुछ पूछेंगे नहीं, और वो मार जब एक समाज के ऊपर बार बार जब पड़ता है इतिहास में, तो वो एक पॉइंट पे पहुंच जाता है कि वहां से फिर वो सोचने लगते हैं कि हमें क्या ये हिंसक तरीके के अलावा कोई और तरीका नहीं है इस लड़ाई को आगे लेके जाने के लिए। और उसके तरफ से बहुत हमारा एक 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 दुख हमने प्रकट किया है इस बार। और दूसरा मुद्दे को लेके उनका ये भी था कि इतिहास गवाह है कि 1947 में अगस्त 14 तारीख को नागा इलाकों का कोई एनेक्सेशन या पकड़ के भारत के साथ जोड़ने का वो नागा लोगों की तरफ से कुछ भी नहीं था, और हम आजादी मना रहे थे नागा इलाकों का। और तब से लेके ये द्वंद्व बहुत साफ सामने रखा है कि एक आजादी का मामला है, एक सेल्फ डिटर्मिनेशन का मामला है। तो इसलिए बहुत नागा लड़ाई का इतिहास अलग है, हम बताना चाहते हैं। और नागा महिलाओं का खास करके हमारा एक भूमिका महिला साथियों का रहा है ये अमन लाने की प्रक्रिया में। वहां पे भी हमारा एक उम्मीद ये है कि ये इतिहास हमारे साथ रहेंगे और हम इस अमन का प्रक्रिया को आगे लेके जा पाएंगे। रोजमेरी, just a couple of more quick questions to you. The Naga peace process has actually been threatened itself, we feel, from all that the government of India, the interlocutor who turned into the governor of the state of Nagaland also in dual capacity, an intelligence man who has been literally the ruler of Nagaland, has been acting like a king out there. Mr. Ravi has left some of the responsibilities now, but we have been seeing that the peace process is not being taken seriously at many times. Do you think, I mean, do the Naga people think, do the Naga mothers and other women's organizations, do you think that the peace process is in a serious peril and threat? Where do you see it going from here?
Well, Vijayan, we are very, very concerned. And I'm glad tonight we're having so many listeners to hear of what actually is going on in the Naga peace process. You have seen the hiccups that we had faced. Also, the last governor who was there in Nagaland, where so much of divisions and so much of other voices had emerged in the peace process. Unfortunately, as peacemakers and as peacekeepers who have been following the process, it is unfortunate to find that the government of India is actually not serious. Not serious in the sense that it is easy to resolve the negotiations which are actually in the last stage of the peace process. Already you have 7 of the Naga political groups already have made their stand clear with the government of India, and there is an understanding. We have the largest group, which is the NSCNIM, at the negotiating table, and now we are stuck with this question of the Naga flag and the constitution. 2 issues which the government of India, looking back into peace processes of other countries, if not of India, of other countries, we can easily find out that there are possibilities of resolving the 2 issues which, if the government is really serious. And we hope this coming year, the government will take these issues seriously and restart and begin the talks, because the talks have actually come to a standstill as of now.
Yeah, it's actually quite a contradiction that we live. No, the only place it looks like where the government of India is defending the Indian Constitution is to the Nagas, trying to enforce it, or at least a remnants of it, because in most other places, including in Kashmir, Jammu and Kashmir, they have literally burned the Constitution themselves and is made a mockery of it in a pluralist society like in India. But this conflict over the Constitution and the flag, How are you looking at, because peace processes have been about give and take. It has been
Definitely.
almost 25 years of conversations between do you think that the NSCN and other groups have the have the permission from the civil society and the groups to kind of go ahead and clinch this at this moment, or do you think that the Naga community is being pushed back, especially through the December violence, into a long past?
See, Vijayan, at the end of the day, everyone wants peace. Whether it's a civil society, whether it is also these armed groups, how long are we actually going to go on like this? We have a next generation. Uh, I probably am the third or the fourth generation of Nagas who have lived under this kind of conflict. So it is for the sake of the next generation that we really need to imagine the kind of peace that we would like to have in our land. The negotiations that will continue and hopefully will start again should actually come to some kind of understanding, and that's exactly what all of us hope for, that the Indian government, the government of India, will take seriously these two issues. There are no legal prohibitions in India actually for any state not to have a flag. It doesn't prohibit. It's just that by convention we don't have. But what about Karnataka and the Kannada flag? And then we've just had Kashmir, unfortunately, whose flag is no longer being used. But then again, I wouldn't compare the Naga struggle with the Kashmir situation too, for that matter. It is a political negotiation, and therefore it has to be politically resolved. And if we want peace, particularly uh, looking at also the situation of the Naga areas vis-a-vis Southeast Asia and India's Act East policy as well as the Look East policy, I think it's very important to take the Naga issue very seriously and resolve if we want peace.
आपका मैसेज बहुत क्लियर है इन टर्म्स ऑफ ये एक लड़ाई ऐतिहासिक रहा है. इस लड़ाई में एक अहिंसक लड़ाई का एक रास्ता हमेशा रहा है. समाज उसके साथ रहा है, लेकिन एक आर्म्ड लड़ाई भी इसमें साथ साथ रहा है. उसमें जो फ्लैग का, कॉन्स्टिट्यूशन का जो मुद्दे आया है, उसमें अगर आप देखेंगे तो भारत के भी राज्यों में ऐसे राज्य है, कर्नाटका जैसे राज्य, जहाँ पे फ्लैग इस्तेमाल करते हैं अपना अपना. तो रोसमेरी जी का ये भी एक आर्ग्यूमेंट है. इसमें जेम्स का एक कमेंट आया है चैट बॉक्स पे, मैं देख रहा था, उसमें जेम्स पोचुरी जी का, the uniqueness of the Naga struggle is about their way of life that is alive to this day, which is the fully functional participatory democracy that exists parallel from the clan, khel, village, tribe and upwards. Rather, it runs contrary to the Indian represented electoral democracy. These two systems are incompatible and there is no meeting point whatsoever. So it is not just a political claim for a separate nation, but the essence of Naga ethos and worldview that fuels the Naga movement for self-determination. Thank you, James, for those very well summarized point that you're making. महिला आंदोलन का एक, मतलब आप सिर्फ नागा इलाकों में नहीं, you've been a recognized woman voice and a woman leader. Do you think that women actually stand a chance in a male-dominated armed conflict? And here I don't just mean the Indian state. Even the Naga, I mean, for example, forces like NSC, and on the table, I've been an observer. I've had the fortunate this thing. I mean, Tapan is here in the conversation, listening to the conversation. Some of these friends have been veterans as co-travelers of the Naga peace process. Do you think women actually stand a chance to be, if not dictating terms, at least making sure that some non-negotiables for peace are put on the table?
Vijayan, even though the Naga society is a very strong patriarchal society, we must understand the great role that Naga women have played over the years, and particularly the Naga Mothers Association in the peace process that we have seen. Women leaders before us, and I'm sure women leaders after us also will continue this kind of peacemaking and peacekeeping. As far as women's voices are concerned, women's voices have actually had a great impact on the armed groups. We've negotiated with the armed groups, and that is also one of the reasons why many of them have come to the peace table. At the same time, we've also had delegations of Naga women who have met top leaders of the government of India and set across some of our terms and conditions why the government of India actually must take the peace process seriously, and what is the kind of future that we envision for the Naga society and the Naga people. And you will find all this on record. And I think that is why it is important also to look at women's perspective of peace and towards peace, because for women, it is more to do with their livelihood, their children, their homes, their land, towards peace and security. And I think a lot of this has been conveyed over the years to our leaders and to the various leaders at the negotiating table.
Thank you. Thank you, Rosemary. I'll definitely want to come back to you, but quickly summarizing some of the points. एक तो इन्होंने बोला कि भारत सरकार का जो कमिटमेंट है, जो इरादे है इस अमन का रास्ते को लेके, इस अमन का प्रक्रिया को लेके, वो कुछ सालों से, पिछले कुछ सालों से लेके बहुत सीरियस नहीं लग रहा है, जिसके चलते अमन का प्रक्रिया को बहुत एक चोट पहुंचा हुआ जरूर है। और दिसंबर का जो लोगों को मारने का जो आर्मी की तरफ से जो बोल रहा है कि गलती से मारे गए लोग वगैरह जो बोल रहा है, उससे तो बहुत ठोस नुकसान पहुंचा है अमन का प्रक्रिया को। नागा जो राजनीतिक समाज है उसने, और साथ जो नागा ग्रुप्स है जिसके साथ ये डिस्कशन सरकार का चल रहा था, जिसमें खास करके NSC एंड IM ग्रुप है, नेशनल सोशलिस्ट काउंसिल ऑफ नागालैंड, आइजैक एंड मुइवा फैक्शन, उनके साथ जो एग्रीमेंट है उसमें ग्रुप्स बिल्कुल पीछे नहीं जाएंगे। हम अपना संविधान को लेके, हमारा फ्लैग को लेके हम बहुत क्लियर हमारा एक पोजीशन रखा हुआ है। नागा मदर्स का, नागा समाज में जो माँ है, माँओं का जो एक पूरा एक संगठन है जिसका भूमिका बहुत अहम रहा है नागा महिलाओं की तरफ से। उन्होंने बहुत साफ अपना एक नजरिया अपने जो आर्म्ड कॉन्फ्लिक्ट के जो नागा आर्मी है उनके सामने भी रखा है कि अमन और एक किस्म का एक सिक्योरिटी का समाज में क्या जरूरत है और महिलाओं के नसर से वो क्यों बहुत अहम है। We will keep the conversation going. Rose, I'll come back to you with the other questions. Thank you very much for the time in the initial stage. I want to bring on a friend from Kashmir, a long-time comrade, as I said, and someone who has been a dashing presence in the Kashmiri civic space. Not an exclusive human rights activist. He has not been someone who is marked out yet to be put in jail, unlike Khurram Parvez, who has been given the privilege of being put in Tihar and then now shifted to Rohini jail. Let us start with condemning the arrest of Khurram and several other hundreds of Kashmiri people who have been subjected to incarceration, jail term, and only for the fact that they are Kashmiris, and sometimes often for the fact that they are vocal Kashmiris who have had the audacity to speak. I love your name though, it says Mad Monkey, and I love your position about the fact that you wanted to be another Kashmiri, and it doesn't matter which Kashmiri it is, whether it is A or B, but we all represent what we are here because we are Kashmiris. Thank you, comrade, for joining us. It is indeed your time you can share your opening remarks and then we'll come back to some questions. ये जो साथी है कश्मीर से है, इनका एक अहमियत है कि इन्होंने बहुत साफ तरीके से हमें बोला है कि हम कश्मीर से ए बोले बी बोले फर्क नहीं पड़ता है, हम सब एक ही है, क्योंकि हम मार खाने वाले कश्मीरी है, हमारे लिए इससे फर्क नहीं पड़ता। हम ये चर्चा खुर्रम को याद करते हुए भी शुरू करना चाहेंगे, क्योंकि खुर्रम परवेज हमारा साथी जम्मू एंड कश्मीर कोalition ऑफ सिविल सोसाइटी का, लेकिन खुर्रम अकेला नहीं है जो जेल में पड़ा हुआ है। सैकड़ों कश्मीरी, खास करके 5 अगस्त 2019 से लेके जो एब्रोगेशन ऑफ जो कॉन्स्टिट्यूशन किया है, आर्टिकल 370 को रीड डाउन किया है, उसके बाद से तमाम साथी जेलों में हैं। लेकिन अभी नए ढंग से जो लोगों को अरेस्ट करना शुरू किया है उसमें खुर्रम को जेल में डाला गया है। वो इसलिए भी है क्योंकि वो बात करने वाला कश्मीरी है, वो मुद्दों को उठाता है, वो सरकार के खिलाफ या मानवाधिकार के हनन के खिलाफ बात करता है, इसलिए उनको जेल में डाला गया है। साथी को हम 5 मिनट उनका बात रखने के लिए देंगे और उसके बाद हम सवाल जवाब के रूप में आएंगे।
Good evening, Vijay. Thank you for the invite, and Professor Rosemary, Professor Siddiq, Advocate Bela Bhatia from Chhattisgarh, and everyone who is here. Thank you for the opportunity. I'll take my 4 minutes and 30 seconds. Basically, Vijay, behind you, there's a picture of Sadat Manto, if I'm not wrong. He traces his ethnicity to Kashmir, and he's written a story in the 1950s, which was Titwal Ka Kutta, which basically describes a dog that exists at the line of control and how he's called by different names on both sides of the line of control, and how ultimately he's shot and killed because he crosses the LOC without permission on both sides. It's very pertinent to where we are today, about 70 years after that story was written, and how we all feel like we are that Titwal Ka Kutta here in Kashmir. As you said, the pandemics have made things a lot worse. A very glaring example of that was when there was a recent function on the death anniversary of a former chief minister. That function could not be held, citing the pandemic rule, whereas a day prior to that, there was a huge festival, music festival, which was organized by the government. So, of course, there are now two laws in Kashmir, one for those in power and one for those on whom that power has to be exerted. If you want to see a dictatorship, please come here. It's very easy for anybody to come and have a look. The silence that you see in terms of the absence of vocal and vociferous protest is not the silence of the hearts. It's not the silence of the minds. It is the silence of the graveyards. And unfortunate as it may seem, but that is the truth. What I feel here is not the fact that Kashmir is dying. It is the idea of India that dies a slow death in Kashmir every day. And unfortunately, the events of 5th of August 2019 just accelerated the process of the death of the idea on which this nation was founded in 1947. I reiterate this thing that I have said prior. Kashmiris never failed India. They never failed India after 1947. They still have not failed India after 2019. But it is India that has repeatedly failed Kashmir over the last 75 years. And unfortunately, the 75 years we have a huge history of constitutional changes which have been implemented without the acquiescence of the people of Kashmir. And now we have the final situation where the constitution almost for us is irrelevant, and we are being ruled by decree without any voice or say in what changes are being implemented around us. To sum up, where do we go from here? It may sound hopeless, but I don't see anywhere where we can go from here. There has to be a momentous change, either in the subcontinent geopolitically, or some huge change of heart somewhere in the people who are in power. But beyond that, a miracle, I doubt. And I'd like to sum it up by saying, you can have a map, but you won't have the people. You can have the bodies, but you won't have the hearts. And as a Kashmiri, I'd like to turn to these 4 lines and say, शायद उनका आखिरी हो ये सितम, हर सितम ये सोचकर हम सह गए, हम वफा करके भी तन्हा रह गए, दिल की अरमा आंसुओं में बह गए. Thank you, Vijay.
Thank you so much, comrade. साथी ने मंटो जी का बात करते हुए बात शुरू किया था. सादत हसन मंटो का चित्र हमारे पीछे है. टीटवाल का कुत्ता, जिसके बारे में हम लोग काउंटिंग डेज कश्मीर में भी इसके बारे में लिखने का प्रयास किया था. जो कहानी सादत हसन मंटो ने लिखा है, तो साथी ने ये बोल के शुरू किया है कि वो हर कश्मीरी टीटवाल का कुत्ता का हालत में है आज की तारीख में. तो ये खुल के लड़ाई कम हो रहा है या खुल के लड़ाई नहीं हो रहा है, या एक क्रांति का आक्रोश में लोग उठ के नहीं दिख रहा है, उसका ये मतलब नहीं है कि कश्मीर का लोग दिल से इसको स्वीकार कर रहा है या इस बदलाव को स्वीकार कर रहा है. ये जो निशब्दता आपको दिख रहा है या आपको सुनाई नहीं दे रहा आवाज से, वो कश्मीर के दिलों से नहीं है. ये शमशान का एक निशब्दता है, जो एक साइलेंस ऑफ द ग्रेवयार्ड है. कश्मीर का आइडिया या कश्मीर का जो ख्वाब जो है वो मर नहीं रहा है. शायद कश्मीरियों के दिल और दिमाग में हिंदुस्तान का ख्वाब खत्म होते जा रहा है, ऐसे साथी का कहना है. और ये बहुत अफसोस की बात है कि जबकि कश्मीर ने भारत को कभी धोखा नहीं दिया, उस तरीके से भारत लगातार और उसके सरकार लगातार कश्मीर को और जम्मू एंड कश्मीर को धोखा देते जा रहा है। और वो ये बहुत अफसोस की बात है कि जब आज के तारीख में अगर आप देखेंगे तो कुछ अद्भुत ना होए तो यही एक राज्य तंत्र, प्रजातंत्र नहीं, राज्य तंत्र और राजाओं के तंत्र जो चलते जा रहा है कश्मीर में, वही आगे जाते रहेंगे, ऐसे साथी का कहना है। उनका बोलना है कि एक मैप रहेंगे जहां लोग शायद नहीं होंगे। उस तरीके का एक द्वंद्व, नया किस्म का द्वंद्व पैदा कर रहा है कश्मीर में। 2019 से लेके भी लोगों ने भारत को धोखा कभी नहीं दिया है, लेकिन भारत ने कश्मीरियों को और कश्मीर के लोगों को कश्मीर को धोखा दिया है, ऐसे साथी का बोलना है। Comrade, you also represent a generation that has grown with violence. How has it been? And I want to be staying very clear of a depressing conversation here for you, especially. You have lived through that, so I don't need to remind you of the vulgarity of violence. But at the same time, I think it's important for us to understand the difference between people who recognize the difference of a AK-47 from an AK-56 just by the sound of it. You represent that generation that has actually grown with a different kind of a violence since the 90s. How do you look back?
Painful, काफी दर्दनाक इतिहास है हमारी। इसका एक कहानी मैं आपको बता सकता हूँ। एक 16 साल की बच्ची एक यूनिवर्सिटी में गई थी। 16 साल की कश्मीरी बच्ची थी, पूरी 16 साल वो कश्मीर में रह चुकी थी, कभी बाहर नहीं गई थी। तो एक यूनिवर्सिटी में पढ़ने गई, तो पहली 1-2 दिन के बाद वो थोड़ा इधर उधर दीवार के बाहर झांकने लगी, क्लासों के बाहर झांकने लगी। तो शाम को उन्होंने अपने वालिद साहब को फ़ोन किया, तो बोला पापा ये बड़ी अजीब सी जगह है। बोला क्या? नहीं, यहाँ पे तो कोई मिलिट्री दिखती नहीं है हमको, ये वर्दी वाले बंदूक वाले कोई यहाँ पे है नहीं, ये हैं कहाँ यहाँ के लोग, मतलब ये तो मुझे दिख नहीं रहे हैं यहाँ पे। तो I think if you ask me, that is my experience. I mean, it's ingrained in us, the maxims and the metaphors we use for the people who wear uniform are not the most pleasant metaphors and maxims you'd have in the language that we speak. They're associated with generally very dark memories of all of us. And it's painful because now this generation, Professor Rosemary alluded to, is the 3rd or 4th generation. And same with us, it's the 3rd or 4th generation. And now it's our children who are going to have to be educated and enlightened as to how to interact with somebody who is carrying a gun, and what to say and what not to say, and how you should find a way out of a situation where bullets are being fired, or where people who are wearing uniform are not behaving in a humane manner. So yeah, it's difficult. If you look back, it has been a very traumatic experience.
साथी का बोलना था कि he actually spoke in Hindi about the 16-year-old story, the story of a 16-year-old who wondered when taken to a different land, wondered about why is it that there are no khaki-clad men here? Why are there no people with guns here when we are not in Kashmir? And which land is this where there are people without guns? The unfortunate reality of the times, but also political determination from some a nation state that wanted to integrate with power, and that, as we are hearing in the Naga areas as well as in Kashmir. साथी का ये भी बोलना ये था कि ये जो अलग अलग पीढ़ियों को जो उसे आना पड़ा है, जैसे नागा इलाकों में 3रा 4था पीढ़ी है, कश्मीर में भी वही हालात है। खास करके जो एक हिंसा को देख के जो बढ़ने का जो वो हुआ है, वहाँ खाकी के सामने जीना या खाकी पहने हुए लोगों के सामने से रोज चलना, बंदूक पकड़ के खड़े होने वाले लोगों के सामने अपने आप को कैसे पेश करना है, वो एक सीख होता है जिंदगी में। वो हमारा भी अभी समय गया, अब हमारा बच्चों का समय आ गया है, साथी का बोलना है। वो सीखने के लिए, वो भी आप लोगों को शायद सीखना ना पड़े, हम लोगों को तो रोज वो सीखना पड़ता है कि हम कैसे इनके सामने पेश आए और हम कैसे अपने आप को बचा के जिंदा रखे हर रोज। वो अपने आप में एक चुनौती है, साथी का बोलना है। I wanted to ask you about connecting it to the post August 5th, 2019 Kashmir. Kashmir mein rehne wala hai Kashmiri. I mean, a Kashmiri in Kashmir today, what does it mean?
It's a countdown to the inhalation. That's how we are viewing it. I may be sounding fatalistic, but it's just wait and watch and pray that things don't get worse than they already are. And it's हम इस बात के खौफ में, इस डर में रहते हैं कि आज शाम को कौन सा ऐसा नया कानून लागू होने वाला है कि हमारा मकान हमसे खींचा जाएगा, हमारी गाड़ी खींची जाएगी, हमारी जॉब से निकाले जाएंगे। अब कुछ पता नहीं रहता है शाम को कौन सा नया लॉ पास किया जाएगा। और मतलब ये एक मतलब जब हम कहते हैं कि एक स्वतंत्र देश है, एक गणतंत्र है, वी आर अ रिपब्लिक, वी आर अ डेमोक्रेसी, हमसे कुछ पूछा नहीं जा रहा है कि आज ये मैं इस मकान में बैठा हूँ, कल ये मकान चाहिए स्ट्रेटेजिक एरिया के तौर पे चाहिए किसी को, किसी ने फैसला कर लिया कि ये स्ट्रेटेजिक एरिया, तो आई हैव टू वैकेट दिस होम and I may not be paid compensation and I may not be given alternative accommodation, and that is the purview of the people in power. And similarly, जैसे कि हमारे एग्रीकल्चरल लैंड था, अब आप मान लीजिए इस बात को कि 16,000 स्क्वायर किलोमीटर कश्मीर वादी है, घाटी जिसको कश्मीर घाटी जिसको बोलते हैं, 16,000 स्क्वायर किलोमीटर है, इसमें करीब 90 लाख लोग रहते हैं। एवरेज एग्रीकल्चरल लैंड होल्डिंग जो है वो बहुत ही कम है, इट इज लेस देन 0.2 to 0.4 हेक्टेयर्स। और उसमें भी अब आपने एग्रीकल्चरल लैंड अप फॉर सेल कर दिया, माने वो अब बिकाऊ है कि एग्रीकल्चरल लैंड बाहर से कोई आके एग्रीकल्चरल लैंड यहाँ खरीद सकता है और उस पर अपनी इंडस्ट्री खरीद सकता है और अपना बना सकता है, वो कुछ भी कर सकता है उसमें। पहले तो इसके लिए एक रोकथाम था, एक लॉज थे जो जिसके जरिए से ये चीज पॉसिबल नहीं होती थी। यहाँ तक कि अगर मेरा खुद का एक एग्रीकल्चरल लैंड होता जिसपे चावल उगता या गेहूं उगता या कुछ भी उगता, उसको मैं कन्वर्ट नहीं कर पाता था विदाउट द परमिशन ऑफ द डीसी। उनका आगे चाहिए था मुझे उसको कन्वर्ट करने के लिए कि भाई मुझे इसमें मकान बनाना है, मुझे एग्रीकल्चरल लैंड कन्वर्ट करना है। अब तो उसकी भी जरूरत नहीं पड़ती आपको, वो बहुत ही उसको इतना फ्री कर दिया है कि अब वो कुछ भी, अब ये है कि जमीन आपसे छीनी जाएगी। और एक एग्रीकल्चरल कम्युनिटी में, रूरल कम्युनिटी में जमीन ही सब कुछ चीज होती है। उनके पास जॉब्स नहीं होते हैं, उनके पास ज्यादा कैश नहीं होता है, उनके पास बिजनेसेस नहीं होते हैं, अब वो भी आपसे छीनी जाएगी। और बहुत सारे ऐसे लॉज हैं जिनका मैं यहाँ पे मतलब इलेबोरेट करना मैं नहीं समझता हूँ, बट ये डर बैठा हुआ है कि शाम तक ये घर मेरा होगा या किसी और का होगा, कुछ नहीं पता।
Yeah, I think he has been bilingual himself, but a couple of points that came in. One, and of course, we live in a fear of fatality every day. No one asks us anything about what is to be done here, because it is a given that they can decide whatever is to be done with our land and our houses and our habitat. 16,000 square kilometers of land is what we refer to as the Kashmir Valley, where an average agricultural land is less than 0.2 hectares. And I mean, 0.2 to 0.4 hectares. But when you look at the special zones that they are getting built there, or the strategic purpose land takeovers that are being done by the Indian Army Defense Forces now, it is very evident that they do not need anybody's permission to take over these properties, this land, these houses, whatever be the purpose. Changing land use pattern they don't blink an eye before changing land use patterns in Kashmir. And Comrade quoted quite a number of new laws that are coming up. He didn't want to elaborate on them. I hope we can definitely have a session on these to understand. When in the rest of India, we keep fighting for example, we have fought for generations against the colonial eminent domain principle based, land acquisition law. And NAPM played a very crucial role in that battle, along with many other groups, including the All India Union of Forest Working People, with Comrade Ashok Chaudhary is here, Roma is here. But many of the Indian movements have had a history of fighting eminent domain. But to see what is happening in Kashmir today in terms of the sheer alienation of land is gigantic. It's unproportionate, disproportionate, and it's extremely painful, because it's unacceptable to say the least. And the fact that it is happening under the garb of the gun, it is happening with the gun playing the more important role of silencing, so as to prevent any civic dissent from happening, is actually the death knell for India in Kashmir, is also the reality. You have been a professional in the valley, and I know I can't have this go without, I don't want to make a reference to who you are, but at the same time, being an educational worker or a health worker in the valley, what does it mean now? Are you able to care for the people? Are you able to take care of the medical needs of the people? How has conflict transformed, especially during the pandemic times?
It has become more difficult to provide the level of care that you would like to provide previously. The pandemic has, of course, like everywhere else, it has resulted in a disruption in supply chains and disruption in normal care of non-COVID ailments. But it's made much worse here because it's a bogey that they have used to suppress or to curtail anything the government feels is not in line with the narrative that it wants to project. So I would say, economically, because over the last 3 years of almost continuous lockdown, economically, the people are deprived. And that has resulted in people not seeking healthcare and not approaching hospitals in time. I would admit that recent schemes are going to change things. And that is mainly because money has come in for the pandemic. That money is saved because thanks to God, the pandemic did not affect the valley as badly as it affected other parts of the region. And so that we have that surplus of money that is being diverted to the care. So that has to be admitted. But at the same time, the specter of the pandemic that's hanging over our head, and the fact that any minor violation of the so-called pandemic laws can result in any sort of punishment makes healthcare all the more difficult.
स्वास्थ्य के या शिक्षा के बारे में जो सवाल था, उसमें साथी का ये बोलना है कि ये और मुश्किल, बहुत ज्यादा मुश्किल हो गया है कश्मीर के घाटी में, खास करके कश्मीर के इलाकों में ये काम करना, क्योंकि लोगों के पास पिछले खास करके 3 साल में जो 2-2.5 साल में जो पैंडेमिक का मामला रहा है, उसमें महामारी के समय में लोगों के पास पैसा ना होने से और उनका 2.5 साल से, मतलब अगस्त 5 तारीख 2019 से जो बिजनेस को खत्म कर दिया गया है कश्मीर में, या आजीविका को खत्म कर दिया गया है, इसके चलते हुए लोगों के पास पैसे का कमी से लोग स्वास्थ्य के जैसे अस्पतालों में जाना उनके लिए नामुमकिन के जैसे हो चुका है एक पूरा तबका के लिए कश्मीर में। और तो वो उसके चलते स्वास्थ्य के ऊपर बहुत असर पड़ा है। लेकिन भगवान ने, एक तरीके से बोल सकते हैं कि भगवान ने बचाया लोगों को, क्योंकि महामारी का असर उस तरीके से कश्मीर में नहीं हुआ है जितना बाकी आसपास के इलाकों में या दिल्ली या उत्तर भारत के क्षेत्रों में हुआ है। तो इसलिए शायद कुछ फर्क तो लोगों का स्वास्थ्य के मामलों में और जिंदगियों में है। साथ ही क्या मुश्किल है? What is more difficult? Is it violence, threat of violence, या गवर्नमेंट ऑफ इंडिया? हिंसा या भारत सरकार? किसके साथ रहना और मुश्किल?
I think all the three are the same. They're all the same. They're all, it's a coin with three sides. They're all the same. The violence, the threat of violence, and the government are all the three the same.
लंबी है गम की शाम मगर शाम ही तो है, अशोक दा ने लिखा है चैट में। जरूर अशोक दा, important reminder. We keep having this conversation. I keep having this conversation with Comrade about the need for us to, in some way, maintain our sanity, our optimism, so to speak, or our dreams. हमारे ख्वाबों को जिंदा रखना क्यों जरूरी है इस लड़ाई को आखिरी तक और सही मंजिल तक पहुंचाने के लिए, वो बहुत important है। I wanted to ask you also, because you have been a writer, as I know, does imagination have a place in your day-to-day life? Does hope hold any place? What do you write, and what do you want to tell the world?
I used to write very positive things. I believed very strongly in the idea of India. I believed that India was a shining light to the world. and it was definitely the most successful of the decolonized countries post World War II. And there is no doubt about it. Up until recent events, of course, there were always going to be peripheral failures. No idea is perfect, but I think that, on August 5th, 2019, when everything was shut down and I was cut off from the world, and I remember falling off my bed, watching TV and hearing those words being uttered in the parliament, and actually collapsing on my back when I realized that this was actually genuinely happening. And I had never thought it imaginable that was going to happen, that the very people, for whom I had given my own blood, the very people whom I had served, would then turn against me and claim that, you are being isolated and you have to be taught a lesson, and this is very important for you because kuch अच्छे होने के लिए कुछ दर्द सहना है आपको. So I found that argument, it didn't make much sense. It was an insensible argument and a very insensitive argument that we as a whole community had to go through hell for one law to be changed, which was done against the will. So my imagination is very negative post August 5th, 2019. I do not have a lot of hope, not least from the current regime that is in power. I do not believe there will be peace in my lifetime, and we will probably have to pay the ultimate price for that peace to ever happen. And it's unfortunate, but this government is going to get far worse and far more drunk on its power before a large section of the people of this country are going to come to their minds and throw this government out of the out of power. And I may sound fatalistic or hopeless, but I believe that that's a fact.
साथी का बोलना ये था कि भारत का जो एक सपना था उस पे भी मतलब भारत एक देश के रूप में, एक जनता के रूप में हमें बहुत उम्मीदें थे और उम्मीदें रहा है. 2019 तक तो कम से कम जरूर रहा है, और मैं बहुत पॉजिटिवली चीजों को लिखता था, प्रयास करता था पॉजिटिव तरीके से चीजों को सामने रखने के लिए अपने लेखों में भी. जब 2019 का जो अनाउंसमेंट पार्लियामेंट में हुआ था उसके बारे में जब मैंने सुना, मैं एक्चुअली अपने बेड से गिर गया था सुनते सुनते, क्योंकि विश्वास नहीं कर पा रहे थे कि ऐसे भी हो सकता है, मतलब इस तरीके से भी चीजें बदल सकता है. तो वो विश्वास करने में भी मुश्किल था. मेरा जो एक इमेजिनेशन है, एक दर्शन अगर बोले, वो नेगेटिव हो गया है उसके बाद. एक तरीके से मैं उम्मीद को बहुत ज्यादा आगे नहीं बढ़ा पा रहा हूँ आज की तारीख में. वो एक सच्चाई है मेरा जिंदगी का, और मुझे लगता है कि हम सबको वो भुगतना ही पड़ेगा. जो चीज हमारे सामने है उससे तो जूझना ही पड़ेगा. हमें अमन के लिए या शांति के लिए, अपना भविष्य के लिए एक बड़ा कॉस्ट तो भुगतना ही पड़ेगा. और जो सरकार एकदम नशे में है, राज सत्ता का चलते हुए सत्ता का पावर को, सत्ता को, अधिकार को, वो एक नशा जैसे हो चुका है, उनको जब तक आप उतारेंगे नहीं वहां से, जो भारत की जनता करेंगे ऐसा उम्मीद है. लेकिन तब तक इस नशे से निकलने वाले जितना भी चीजें हो, चाहे वो हिंसा ही सही, उसको तो हम लोगों को झेलना ही पड़ेगा. ऐसे साथी का कहना है. It's not a separate question from what I asked. As a Kashmiri, do you see an alternate future anytime in your lifetime? You said that probably not in your lifetime. I would want to disbelieve that, but at the same time, I just want to hear from you on that.
We have to learn to live together. There is no alternative to living together. I mean, Europe fought for 1,000 years with each other over things as useless as cups and roses and who marries whom. But those wars lasted 1,000 years until they had to pay an extremely heavy price, and they realized that they can't just keep fighting like this forever and ever and ever. And the same thing is going to happen in South Asia. We cannot live in a situation where we are having conflicts at each and every nook and corner. And this is not a situation that in the long run it bodes well for anyone. And there will come a generation, I don't know when that generation will come. There will come a generation, there will be tall leaders, there will be strong leaders who are going to say, look, we have to learn the 1.5, 1.6 billion people who are in this subcontinent. We have to learn to live together. I fear that it will be a natural process, like an earthquake or an environmental disaster, that will affect people across the boundaries of South Asia, that is going to make everyone wake up and say that we have common problems and we have to figure out common solutions. And we need to put these politics of religion, politics of hatred, politics of what ethnicity, they have to be accepted. But at the same time, we have bigger supranational problems that need to be solved. And that generation, I don't know whether I will be here, but that generation will come. And that is the only future that we can have, a future where we learn to live together.
साथ में रहने का जीना, साथ में जीना सीखना पड़ेगा. ऐसे नेताएं आएंगे जो या हमारे समाज से उठ के आएंगे, जहाँ हम ही बनेंगे, जहाँ हमें पूरा साउथ एशिया का, दक्षिण एशिया के साथ ही बात कर रहा है, सिर्फ भारत नहीं, पूरा दक्षिणी एशिया में, चाहे वो एक एनवायरमेंटल डिजास्टर के चलते हो, कुछ और चीज के चलते हो, लेकिन जब तक ये दीवारें नहीं टूटेंगी और लोगों को ये समझ में नहीं आएगा कि हमें इतने तमाम बिलियन लोग हैं, हम लोग साउथ एशिया में, हम लोग एक दूसरे के साथ जीना सीखना पड़ेगा और जीना पड़ेगा, और वही हमारे लिए एक भविष्य बनेंगे. एक साथ ही हमारा भविष्य है. साथ ही इससे बेहतर एक ऑप्टिमिज्म नहीं हो सकता, और आपका दिल से निकली हुई बात है, तो हमें उम्मीद है कि हम साथ में चलेंगे. और ये जैसे अशोकदा ने बोला, ये शाम ही तो है, और इस शाम को हम आपसे बहुत धन्यवाद कहना चाहेंगे. But do stay with us. We will definitely, and I want to request all the audience and friends here, if you have queries, your comments, बहुत सारे चीजें चैट बॉक्स में आ रहा है. मेरा सभी साथियों से अनुरोध है कि आप चैट बॉक्स को जरूर फॉलो कीजिएगा, क्योंकि बहुत साथी लोग अपना एक कश्मीर को लेके पोजीशन, नागा इश्यू को लेके पोजीशन, और अपना एक because nobody here is a resource person or an expert on anything. We are in a conversation here. The whole concept of this session itself and an APM's effort is to make sure that हम लोग एक दूसरे से सुने, ग्राउंड में जो साथी है, जमीनी आवाज जो है, उसको हम कितना और साथियों के साथ लेके आ सकते हैं, और जमीनी आवाजों को एक एम्पलीफाई करने का, एक पब्लिक एड्रेस सिस्टम के थ्रू लगाने का एक प्रयास है ये चर्चा. तो कश्मीर के साथी का सलाम हम जरूर करना चाहेंगे. और साथी बेला भाटिया जी का, जैसे मैंने पहले भी बोला, उनका यहाँ पे उनका परिचय देने का बहुत ज्यादा जरूरत नहीं है. दक्षिणी छत्तीसगढ़ के बस्तर में स्थित एक स्वतंत्र शोधकर्ता, लेखिका और मानवाधिकार वकील है. वह सेंटर फॉर स्टडी ऑफ डेवलपिंग सोसाइटीज दिल्ली में के साथ एसोसिएट रहा है. टाटा इंस्टीट्यूट में पढ़ाई है, वहाँ पे एक प्रोफेसर के रूप में पढ़ाई है. दलित आदिवासी इश्यूज से लेके ऑपरेशन, human rights violations, quite a number of wide-ranging things that Bela has written on, commented on. I don't want to put her into the category of analyst, etc. She has been with the people and has always tried to keep it to the basic of using her intellectual prowess, her capacities, her writing skills, her communication skills, now as a lawyer too, in the interest of the people, and that's something that she has kept. Bela, over to you for your opening remarks, including this translation time that has been taking. I think it has almost become like half an hour for a speaker from the 22 minutes that we had thought about. But if you can be bilingually speaking, then that can make it easier for the time. Over to you, Bela.
सबको जोहार, जिंदाबाद. मुझे बहुत खुशी है आज आप सबके साथ यहाँ पे इस बातचीत में मैं भाग ले पा रही हूँ. Or especially with Rosemary, and not met you, Rosemary, for a long time, and the not so mad monkey, and Siddiq and all participants. जो हमने अभी जो बहुत महत्वपूर्ण बातें सुनी हमारे देश के दो इलाकों से, जहाँ पे इतना लंबा समय से अभी तक जो कॉन्फ्लिक्ट है उसका कुछ भी निराकरण नहीं हो पा रहा है. ये दोनों एरियाज में जो कुछ भी चलता आया है, इसको हम आज़ादी की लड़ाइयाँ ही कहेंगे। जो बस्तर में हो रहा है, और बस्तर में अब 15 साल से ज़्यादा जो अ अ, बहुत ही एक वायलेंस का जो बस्तर का एक चैप्टर, एक हिस्ट्री में शायद सबसे वायलेंट चैप्टर, जहाँ सबसे ज़्यादा वायलेंस बस्तर में हुई, वो 2005 के बाद बस्तर में हम देख रहे हैं। और बस्तर में जो कुछ भी चल रहा है, वो भी एक आज़ादी की लड़ाई ही है। बस्तर की लड़ाई भी अ, आज़ादी की लड़ाई इसलिए है क्योंकि वो सही डेमोक्रेसी के लिए लड़ाई है, वो इज़्ज़त के लिए लड़ाई है, वो समानता के लिए लड़ाई है, वो समान नागरिकता की लड़ाई है। जैसे हम जानते हैं कि बस्तर एक आदिवासी बहुमूल्य क्षेत्र है, जहाँ पे 5th शेड्यूल है, जहाँ नागालैंड और हमारे 7 जहाँ राज्यों में जहाँ 6th शेड्यूल है, बस्तर में 5th शेड्यूल है। और 5th शेड्यूल वाले जो एरियाज़ हैं हमारे देश के, जो आदिवासी बहुमूल्य एरियाज़ हैं, इन सभी एरियाज़ में किस तरह के क्या इश्यूज़ हैं डेमोक्रेसी के, डेवलपमेंट के, किस तरह के संघर्ष यहाँ पे चल रहे हैं, हथियारबंद संघर्ष चल रहे हैं, अहिंसक आंदोलन चल रहे हैं, किस तरह से राज्य यहाँ पे एक दमनकारी राज्य का वेश लेता है, ये सभी कुछ हम लोग एक बस्तर एक उदाहरण की तरह है जो बस्तर में हम देख रहे हैं। 5th शेड्यूल में सेल्फ गवर्नेंस का एक प्रॉमिस था। इसमें लोगों को आज़ादी दी गई है, पेसा एक्ट के साथ उसको अगर जोड़कर देखें तो। मगर जहाँ पे आज यही सब जो सेल्फ गवर्नेंस के लिए, बेसिक डेमोक्रेसी के लिए जो यहाँ पे लड़ाइयाँ चल रही हैं, वो इन्हीं सवालों के लिए चल रही हैं। जो रिसोर्सेज हैं यहाँ पे, क्योंकि ये पूरा एरिया में और सभी आदिवासी क्षेत्रों में, जैसे हम जानते हैं, यहाँ ये रिसोर्स रिच एरियाज हैं और यहाँ पे रिसोर्सेज की लड़ाई है। इस रिसोर्सेज का किस तरह का उपयोग किया जाए, किन के लिए किया जाए, कैसे किया जाए। यहाँ पे हमारे नेशन का एक सही चरित्र हमको दिखने को मिलता है। किस तरह से वो एक तरफ जहाँ लोग राइट टू लाइफ के लिए लड़ रहे होते हैं, और दूसरी तरफ कहाँ यही नेशन और सत्ता पूरा किस तरह से कॉरपोरेट्स के लिए, और जो हमारे देश के जो ज़्यादा पावरफुल सेक्शंस हैं, रिच सेक्शंस हैं, उनकी तरफ खड़ा रहता है। तो बस्तर में जो हम लड़ाई देख रहे हैं, वो एक तरह से एक क्राइसिस ऑफ सिटीजनशिप की लड़ाई है। किस तरह सिटीजन को साइलेंस किया जाता है, सिटीजन को जेल भेजा जाता है, सिटीजन को मारा जाता है, सिटीजन को एक दुश्मन की तरह समझा जाता है, और किस तरह से लोगों के पॉइंट ऑफ व्यू से एक अजीब स्थिति होती है बिलोंगिंग की भी, क्योंकि यही उनकी धरती है, यही उनकी जमीन है, यही उनका जंगल है, यही उनका इतिहास है, यही उनके पूर्वज रहे हैं, यही उनकी पूरी कहानी है। तो एक तरफ कहाँ जाए वो, चांद पर तो नहीं जा सकते, कहीं दूसरी जगह तो नहीं जा सकते, यही यही उनका भूतकाल रहा है, यही वर्तमान और यही भविष्य भी रहना है। तो एक तरफ कहाँ मतलब बिलोंगिंग भी है, और किस तरह से इसी जगह में एलियनेशन भी है। तो ये सभी कुछ एक मतलब एक ही दृश्य, मतलब एक ही इसमें ये सभी चीजें का एक तरह का प्ले हम लोग को यहाँ पे देखने को मिलता है। जैसा हम जानते हैं, यहाँ पे जो मुख्य लड़ाई चल रही है वो राज्य की सीपीआई माओइस्ट पार्टी के साथ में चल रही है। ये 2005 के बाद ये एक बहुत यहाँ पे सीवियर एक रिप्रेशन का यहाँ पे दौर चला है, काउंटर इंसर्जेंसीज जो सरकार ने अपनाई, स्ट्रैटेजिक हैमलेटिंग से लेके सल्वाजुडूम, स्ट्रैटेजिक हैमलेटिंग, ऑपरेशन ग्रीन हंट इत्यादि। तो ये सब कुछ एक तरफ यहाँ पे चलता आया है। आज के दिन में कभी ऐसा लगता है कि ये जो वॉरफेयर है, वॉर तो अभी भी चल रहा है। कभी-कभी ऐसा लगता है कि इसका इंटेंसिटी कम हो गया है, मगर इवन इफ वो कभी लो इंटेंसिटी वॉरफेयर रहे या हाई रहे, मगर वॉर तो अभी भी चल रहा है, और वॉर के साथ-साथ जो कुछ भी हमें हमेशा देखने को मिलता है, हिंसा, तरह-तरह के ह्यूमन राइट्स वायलेशंस, फेक एनकाउंटर्स, सेक्सुअल असॉल्ट, फैब्रिकेटेड केसेस में लोगों को जेलों में भरना, पूरा समय एक आवाम जो चिंतित रहती है और एक दुखी रहती है। हमने जब देश में जब हम अलग-अलग ग्रामीण क्षेत्रों में घूमते हैं, तो मुझे खास करके लोगों की हँसी, laughter of the people, हमेशा it's a very special feel to be with people in rural India. There is a certain sense of freedom, there is a certain sense of something, but in Bastar, actually, that is what you find missing. You find what is missing here is laughter, you know, that everyday laughter, the kind of life which perhaps people lived once before the war. So इन 5 मिनटों में मैं अंत ये कहकर करूँगी कि लोग यहाँ पे हारे नहीं हैं, लोग अभी भी यहाँ पे लड़ रहे हैं, हथियारबंद लड़ाई भी यहाँ चल रही है, मगर अभी पिछले 2021 का अगर हम एकमात्र चीज़, अगर हम जिस चीज़ पे ध्यान अगर देना चाहें, तो वो यहाँ पे एक बहुत ही ताकतवर एक संघर्ष यहाँ पे युवा पीढ़ी ने शुरू किया है। यहाँ के युवकों ने, जिन्होंने बचपन से यहाँ पे लड़ाइयाँ और यहाँ पे वायलेंस देखी, आज ये युवा पीढ़ी खुद सड़कों पर उतर आई है। ये शुरुआत इसकी छोटी-मोटी शुरुआत कई दूसरे इलाकों से हुई थी, मगर ये एक बड़ी ज्वाला सिलगर नामक गाँव से बनी, जहाँ पे लोगों ने वहाँ पे एक नया मिलिट्री कैंप जो बन रहा था, उसका विरोध शुरू किया मई 2021 में, और उसके बाद वहाँ गोलियाँ चली, 3 लोग वहाँ मारे गए, एक महिला जो गर्भवती थी वो भी मारी गई। इसके बावजूद सिलगर का संघर्ष आज भी जारी है, मौसम बदलते रहे हैं, मगर वहाँ पे संघर्ष जारी है, और सिलगर से ही वो आग आज दूर-दूर के इलाकों में, बीजापुर के ही कई इलाकों में, सिलगर बीजापुर में है, तो बीजापुर के ही कई इलाकों में आज के दिन में लोग संघर्षरत हैं, धरना पर हैं, रैलियाँ निकल रही हैं। उसी तरह सुकमा में हो रहा है, उसी तरह दंतेवाड़ा में हो रहा है, उसी तरह नारायणपुर, कांकेर एरिया में, सभी जगह हो रहा है। तो यहाँ पे एक अब जहाँ एक तरफ हिंसा से हथियारबंद लड़ाई चल रही थी, वहीं आज एक बहुत ही ताकतवर एक a sea of struggles. It's not one single struggle, but actually a sea of struggles that is happening right now in Bastar. So justice के लिए और न्याय के लिए, डेमोक्रेसी के लिए ये लड़ाइयाँ जारी हैं.
Thank you, Bela. And thank you for also trying to attempt in both languages. I would actually request friends to let us know in chat if people are able to follow in either language. Hindi में आप तो सुन ही पा रहा है, अंग्रेजी शब्द और कुछ अंग्रेजी लफ्ज़ों को और sentences she has added. So if there are friends who are not able to follow, then I can provide a gist, but otherwise I would want not to waste too much time in translating things that everybody is able to understand. Thank you, Bela, and thank you for keeping that broad picture of how it is a battle for democracy, how it is actually a freedom fight in that sense, as you mentioned, and the battle for resources in terms of decision making of who decides for whom, the age-old question of the development with a capital D reappearing again and again. But this has also been a history of oppression that indigenous people have faced in India, as we all know from history. And the Silgar movement that has started, especially since 2021, has been a very significant one. As you put it correctly, it has spread like wildfire in terms of people also understanding this new battle. Would you call this a significant transition from the 2005-2010 phase, where you saw the CPI Maoists being very powerful, the Salva Judum growing in its capacity? Mahendra Karma was very active in these areas, and there was a counterinsurgency movement of the civic kind, which was militarized by the state. आपको क्या लगता है कि एक पूरा एक युग का बदलाव है छत्तीसगढ़ में?
मुझे लगता है एक अलग तरह की आवाज नीचे से अब आ रही है, क्योंकि जब सल्वा जुडुम का जब दौर था तो उस समय मिलिटराइजेशन, इंटेंसिव मिलिटराइजेशन का यहाँ पे एक शुरुआत यहाँ पे हो रही थी। पैरामिलिट्री को बाहर से लाया जा रहा था और यहीं के आदिवासियों को एसपीओज बना के पैरामिलिट्री के साथ मिलके और विजिलेंटी ग्रुप्स का उपयोग करके यहाँ पे उस समय स्ट्रैटेजिक हैमलेटिंग किया गया था और हजार लोगों का डिस्प्लेसमेंट हुआ था और बहुत ह्यूमन राइट्स वायलेशंस हुए थे। तो उस समय इस एरिया में घूमना ही मुश्किल था, मतलब जाके पूछना क्या हो रहा है, कहाँ हो रहा है, मतलब एक बहुत ही एक पूरा डर का एक पूरा माहौल था। आज भी डर है, मगर एक अलग तरह का यहाँ पे वातावरण है। आज एक तरफ तो हम देखते हैं कि रूटीनाइजेशन हो गया है कि वॉर का भी, अगर बहुत लंबे समय तक जब वॉर चलता है then even war becomes like a routine. So एक तरफ एक रूटीनाइजेशन है, चेक पॉइंट्स हैं, fake encounters have become routine, people being put into prisons has become routine. So एक तरफ तो there is a routinization. But at the same time, the kind of fear that was there earlier, where people never would go to the local thanas to report or to complain, and as I said, even for outsiders to come in to investigate about what's happening in the region. So to some extent, at least, I feel that now that has lessened, and people are going out. There have been now many instances where people have gheraud police thanas. They have demanded that their FIRs be registered, though that continues to be a battle, क्योंकि वो जो बेसिक राइट है उनका कि कम से कम FIR तो रजिस्टर हो, उतना भी रजिस्टर नहीं करते हैं। केवल जो हर एक मुठभेड़ के बाद, एनकाउंटर के बाद जो पुलिस के द्वारा ही जो कंप्लेन दिया जाता है, उसी का ही वो FIR बना लेते हैं, और लोगों के कंप्लेन का जो काउंटर FIR बनाना चाहिए वो लोग नहीं बनाते हैं, और हर बार ये लड़ाई लोगों को लड़नी पड़ती है। पर बात ये है कि अब लोग लड़ रहे हैं, अब लोग बाहर आ रहे हैं, बोल रहे हैं, और सर्व आदिवासी समाज जैसे सिविल सोसाइटी ऑर्गेनाइजेशंस भी इसमें आ रहे हैं सामने। CPI भी यहाँ बहुत लंबे समय से कार्यरत रही है। इसके अतिरिक्त यहाँ पे जैसे मीडिया में हम लोग जरूर न्यूज़ पढ़ते हैं नेशनल मीडिया में, मगर लोकल मीडिया के लिए मैं खास बोलना चाहूंगी कि ह्यूमन राइट्स वायलेशंस का सबसे पहले लोकल मीडिया वाले रिपोर्टिंग करते हैं, और हर एक, मतलब इसके बावजूद कि कई लोगों को बहुत कुछ झेलना पड़ा है, लोकल मीडिया ने आवाज वो लोग उठाते आए हैं। तो इस तरह से कई कुछ यहाँ पे हम we are also finding that there are all these very sort of positive changes, and the recent जो struggles अभी हो रहे हैं, they are against militarization, they are against the new camps that are coming up, because whenever new camps come up, people see that atrocities on them increase. So most of these are against the new camps and the big roads, where people are saying that it is wrong to say that we don't want roads. We want roads, but we don't want such wide roads, because that then is suspicious. We are suspicious. We feel that that is being done for corporates and for business interests, and our own need is roads, but not such big wide roads. यहाँ पे लोग अब ग्राम सभा की बात, पैसा कानून की बात उठा रहे हैं, क्योंकि पहले माओइस्ट एरियाज में पैसा कानून की बात और ग्राम स्वराज की बात पहले नहीं सुनते थे, मगर आज के दिन में ये सभी क्षेत्र जो मैं आज आपको कह रही हूँ, a sea of struggles. So a sea of struggles is in the Maoist paths. I mean, these are the same areas which are also Maoist areas, and which are also today the site of these non-violent struggles. And as part of the non-violent struggles, they are saying we want Anganwadis, we want schools, we want health centers, we want roads, and we want accountability. So, they are making these kind of demands in a non-violent way. But I should mention here about the games that the state continues to play. ये एक बहुत इम्पोर्टेंट बात है कि राज्य सरकार का चरित्र कुछ भी नहीं बदलता है। मतलब एक हथियारबंद लड़ाई के सामने में जो उसका चरित्र रहता है, उसको दबाने का, कुछ भी हथकंडे उठाने का, मतलब कोलैटरल डैमेज को तो कुछ नहीं समझते हैं। वो तो बोलते हैं कि हाँ, कोलैटरल डैमेज तो होगा ही। जो फॉल आउट है इस तरह की हथियारबंद लड़ाइयों में, जहाँ फेक एनकाउंटर्स होते ही हैं, सेक्सुअल असॉल्ट होता ही है, लोगों का अरेस्टिंग फेक केसेस में होता ही है, like there are so many cases under UAP here. एक केस में कई बार, एक बड़े केस में बड़ा इंसिडेंट हुआ तो ज्यादा लोगों को एक साथ जेल करते हैं, और एक साथ कई बार 100 से ऊपर लोगों पर UAP डाल देते हैं। हालांकि छत्तीसगढ़ गवर्नमेंट इज कंप्लीटली in denial, and it lies through its teeth, as far as the number of UAPA cases are concerned in the state, because there are many UAPA cases here. And as I said, in one single case, it's not about one person, it's often about many persons under UAPA. So इस तरह के जो टेरर लेजिस्लेशंस का यूज, उसके पहले CSPSA का यूज, सो ये सब कुछ यहाँ पे होते आ रहा है। और साथ साथ में मगर स्टेट की तरफ से कुछ हम लोग को कुछ एक, जैसे अगर लोग नॉन वायलेंटली लड़ रहे हैं तो वन वुड एक्सपेक्ट दैट द गवर्नमेंट should then listen, but we don't find that the government listens. In fact, they are paternalistic in their attitude. They continue to show as though they know better. They create obstructions on the part of people when they are trying to fight for their rights legitimately. जैसे कोविड को ही यहाँ पे इतना मिसयूज किया है कोविड को, कि कोविड प्रोटोकॉल है, 144 लगा देते हैं, फिर लोगों को मतलब एक साथ, और इस पूरे पीरियड में जो मैं लड़ाइयों का, मैं जो दौर कह रही हूँ, खुली लड़ाइयों का दौर, ये पूरा कोविड का दौर रहा है। 2019, 2020, 21, ये पूरे दौर में यहाँ पे खुली लड़ाइयाँ हो रही हैं, जहाँ इतनी तादाद में लोग बाहर निकल रहे हैं। एंड येट द गवर्नमेंट कंटिन्यूज टू instead of listening to people, it continues to obstruct people. There are so many cases where people, when they have come out in rallies, or they are trying to meet, जैसे अभी लेटेस्ट जो सिचुएशन है जहाँ पे यही सिलगेर आंदोलन से लोग अभी 19 तारीख को ये लोग जा रहे थे गवर्नर को मिलने के लिए। 10 एक्टिविस्ट्स वर गोइंग, और उनको गीदम से वो लोग बैठे बस में, कोंडा गांव विच इज 4 hours अवे फ्रॉम गीदम, वहां पे उनको उतार लिया जाता है रात को 12 बजे। और पूरा दिन, दूसरा दिन मतलब 20 तारीख को सभी लोग उनको ढूंढ रहे हैं कि कहाँ हैं ये लोग, who has taken them out of the bus, why are they arrested, are they detained? There's no information given by any channel, and it's a very simple matter. जैसे अगर हम लोग अगर फोन करें एसपी को, एएसपी को, अगर वो हमारा फोन ही नहीं उठाए, then that is the end of the matter. हम फिर कुछ यहाँ पे उस तरह की स्थिति आती है कि this kind of information हम नहीं ले पाते हैं। 20 तारीख को एसपी कोंडागांव का नहीं उठा रहा है फोन, एएसपी नहीं उठा रहा है, कलेक्टर 11:30 बजे रात को बोलते हैं कि I have no information about this, while it is already 24 hours that 10 people have been taken down from the bus. Next day, the IG says that they were neither detained nor were they arrested, but COVID protocol, so they have been sent to Sukma, and वहाँ पे उनका test वो सब हो रहा है, and 4 are positive. But it's amazing that he should say that they were neither detained nor arrested. But how come their phones were taken? Phones had been confiscated. They were not able to reach their families. There were phone calls coming. जो कुछ लोगों ने देखा, 2 leaders were beaten वहाँ पे सुकमा में। तो जब डिटेन नहीं हुए हैं, अरेस्ट नहीं हुए हैं, तो उनका पुलिस में उनकी मारपीट कैसे हो रही है? उनका परिवार चिंतित है, दूर-दूर से उनका परिवार है और चिंतित है। सो इवन दिस बेसिक, ये जो मैं कह रही हूँ, आप सोचिए ये कॉन्फ्लिक्ट जोन है, यहाँ पे इस तरह के अनेक इंस्टेंसेस पूरा समय होते रहते हैं। बट इवन दिस बेसिक थिंग कि a family member can call a particular number and find out कि मेरा व्यक्ति किधर है। So इस तरह से COVID has been used in the first wave, in the second wave, and अभी third wave में भी COVID is being used to stop people from exercising their democratic right of dissent.
Well, it's actually very important for us to actually, I'm sorry to intrude, but actually it's very interesting and important for us to understand, especially when we are talking about governmental changes in states like UP and Uttarakhand too, that if it just doesn't matter that from a BJP to a Congress government comes in and that is not able to at least give more access to people's voices, civic activism, or people like you who have been fighting in the ground, not only as an activist, but also as a legal stakeholder, as a lawyer now. Doesn't it make any difference whatsoever? I mean, in the ground for the people, or there are some things that have gotten better at least?
See, some things have got better only in the sense that जिस तरह से पहले vigilante groups को पुलिस यूज कर रही थी, वो जब कांग्रेस came to power, all those groups, suddenly they sort of vanished. The same individuals are very much there in society, but ये clear था कि पुलिस का उनका जो कुछ भी nexus था, that was not being entertained anymore. But that is not to say that उसी तरह का काम नहीं हो रहा है। अब उसी तरह का काम सरकार के ही फोर्सेस के द्वारा हो रहा है, क्योंकि सरकार ने अभी न्यू फोर्सेस क्रिएट किए हैं, जैसे कि DRG, so this is the District Reserve Guards. Now these are surrendered militants usually, and they are used as eyes and ears of the government. They are given complete impunity, and most of in recent times जो fake encounters जहाँ हुए हैं, instances of sexual assault हुए हैं, तो क्योंकि लोग उनको पहचानते हैं, क्योंकि ये पहले उनके इलाके में आते थे, ये लोग जब ये लोग नक्सली थे, तो इसीलिए लोग उनका नाम भी लेते हैं. So now जो vigilante aspect of the whole thing is being done by the forces, themselves. So that way, I mean, even though you therefore don't need to arm a civilian. I mean, you actually have legal forces who are doing this illegal work for you. So that is what we are seeing here in Bastar. And so कांग्रेस के आने के बाद बहुत कुछ बदला है, ऐसा मैं नहीं कहूंगी. बहुत कुछ सेम है, मतलब इन टर्म्स ऑफ द इकोनॉमिक पॉलिसी वैसे का वैसा है. महेंद्र कर्मा को कांग्रेस अभी भी हीरो मान रही है, जबकि लोगों ने उनको, हम जानते हैं महेंद्र कर्मा को कैसे मारा गया था, मगर आज बस्तर यूनिवर्सिटी का नाम महेंद्र कर्मा के, दिस इज ड्यूरिंग द कांग्रेस regime, it's been named after Mahendra Karma, and an educational institution like that, the largest hospital, public hospital here in not far from Jagdalpur in Dimrapal, has also, besides one other public person, it's also been named after Mahendra Karma. So इकोनॉमिक पॉलिसी अगर आप देख लें, मिलिटराइजेशन देख लें, सीपीआई माओइस्ट के साथ में पूरा जो लड़ाई का पूरा जिस तरह का रहा है वो देख लें, इम्प्यूनिटी टू फोर्सेस देख लें, ये सभी चीजों में कांग्रेस इज द सेम एज द बीजेपी। केवल एक चीज में मैं ये कहूंगी कि हालांकि उसमें भी सेक्युलरिज्म के बारे में कि आज बस्तर में फिर भी कहीं ना कहीं क्योंकि कांग्रेस है तो हमको लगता है कि बस्तर में और छत्तीसगढ़ में शायद उतना बोल्डली वो लोग आगे नहीं बढ़ पा रहे हैं, द राइट विंग। बट एट द सेम टाइम ड्यूरिंग द कांग्रेस regime we have seen many attacks on Christian Adivasis also. So the Congress has actually, they really have to show us how they are different, from the Raman Sarkar.
Thank you, Bela.
Whether it be justice, or whether it be peace.
Yeah, I think both are very important frameworks. No, I mean, it's good to hear that feedback also, because there have been multiple efforts over the years from civic activists and civil society or movement groups as well to make sure that the extremity that was, or extreme hostility that was there during the government of Raman Singh versus the current, to make sure that a different government came into existence. And I think what are the spaces that movements and groups are able to garner there is also an important point. साथियों, मतलब बेला के साथ एक्चुअली और भी बातचीत करने थे, लेकिन समय का अभाव जरूर है। लेकिन मैं एक जरूर सवाल पूछ के अगले वक्ता के पास जाना चाहूँगा। एक तो ये है कि पेसा का 25वां साल मनाया जा रहा है। What does PESA mean in many of these areas in real senses? And also, where is it that the future of Adivasi identity, among the kind of social and political hostility it faces? And you mentioned the question of alienation of resources. Hidme Markam has been in jail since March 8th. And I think, I mean, as we started the Kashmir conversation, mentioning the condemnation of खुर्रम्स अरेस्ट, इट्स इम्पॉर्टेंट कि हिदमे को जिस तरीके से सरकार ने जेल में रखा है पिछले 1 साल से 10 महीनों से, तो वो बिल्कुल निंदनीय है और हम चाहते हैं कि हिदमे को जितना जल्दी बाहर लाया जाए। Bela, this question on what is the relevance of having these acts like PESA, FRA, etc. in Adivasi lands where there is a direct threat of war. If you don't surrender your resources, then it's a war that you're faced with. Whether there are Maoists or not, it is immaterial. What is your take?
Well, a right kind of law, it gives hope. And I think that is what PESA personifies and FRA personifies in Bhatia. We know that in Chhattisgarh, rules have not been made. So, yeah, कहीं भी हमें कोई उदाहरण नहीं दिखता है जहाँ पे पैसा से का सचमुच उपयोग हो पाया और लोगों की आवाज सुनी गई, मगर फिर भी वो एक पॉइंट है जिसके इर्द गिर्द मोबिलाइजेशन हो सकता है। और ग्राम सभा makes very good sense to people, that we can have our own gram sabhas, and in the gram sabhas we decide what should be, what is our decision regarding alienation of land or industry, etc. So इसीलिए मैं मतलब यही कहूंगी कि जो जैसे कॉन्स्टिट्यूशन के लिए जो लड़ाई है उसका बहुत कुछ तो इम्प्लीमेंट नहीं हो रहा है, मगर जो वो एक उम्मीद है हम सिटीजन्स के लिए कि हम इसको हम और स्ट्रेंथन कर सकते हैं, इसके इर्द गिर्द हम मोबिलाइज कर सकते हैं और हम लड़ सकते हैं। एंड ऑल्सो द नॉलेज दैट यू आर ऑन द राइट पाथ, इवन दो सामने वाला गलत कर रहा है, सामने वाला सुन नहीं रहा है, सामने वाला दमन कर रहा है, मगर ये नॉलेज कि आप यही रास्ता ठीक रास्ता है और इसी रास्ते पे हम चलते रहेंगे और हम ज्यादा से ज्यादा लोग हम मोबिलाइज होंगे और हम मतलब एक दिन आएगा जब आपको सुनना पड़ेगा। तो so that is all I can say, that it gives the people hope.
Thank you, Bela, and thank you very much for putting it out quite comprehensively and clearly. मतलब आपने जिस तरीके से मामला रखा है. I'm sorry for the shortage of time that we are having in this conversation, and I'm sorry to all the audience too that this is something we have tried to kind of bring together these conversations in a sense of making sure that people get to hear this in a political context, also not just making it a theoretical debate about conflicts. सिर्फ द्वंद्वों के बारे में एक चर्चा करने का मकसद नहीं है. आज हमारा एक मकसद है कि बेला से लेके कश्मीर के साथी से लेके नागालैंड से साथी जो बात किया है रोजमेरी जी, और अभी जो सिद्दीक साहब से हम सुनेंगे, द्वंद्व का मसला या ये मसला है कश्मीर, मसला है नागालैंड, मसला है छत्तीसगढ़, हम इन मुद्दों को कैसे as a country, as a people, how are we going to take on these questions? And Siddiq Wahid is a historian, someone who has actually been teaching for years across the world, not just in South Asia, but also across the world. He has been in the States, in US, but also someone who has held very important positions, both as an academic as well as a thinker. He has written over the past several years. You can definitely look up Siddiq's writings. Siddiq Saab, thank you very much for joining us. I know you are placed in Kashmir right now, back in India, and amidst the pandemic, you actually got to manage to come back to India and travel back. Siddiq Saab, you know the format, so you can have your opening remarks and then we can get into the conversation. Professor Siddiq Wahid.
Great. Thank you, Vijay. And I'd also like to thank the Alliance for People's Movements, because I appreciate the two implicit recognitions by the Alliance for People's Movement. The first of these is the importance of plurality and diversity, and the need to cross boundaries territorially, racially, culturally, religiously, and politically, and in other ways in South Asia. And the other implicit recognition is that the dramatic growth worldwide of people's protests by peoples in the 21st century across the globe, pitting people against states, is something that I think needs to be recognized. People's protests against everything ranging from climate change to corruption to unemployment to group health, group rights, and as well as global commons. So I think that these two, against the backdrop of these two, I'm delighted to be talking in terms of our region and how recent history has played out for us in this context, in these two contexts. My focus is really, for a historian, a very, very short period. And that period is 3 years, roughly covering 2019 to January, or today, 2022. To my mind, these 3 years have translated to disaster for J&K and India as a whole, for South Asia and for the world. And let me quickly sort of try to run over these 3 years in the next 4 minutes or so to let you know, sort of let you know how I'm looking at these and why, from a perch that happens to be Kashmir. Here's a quick summation. February 2019, you had the Pulwama explosion, which was first touted as an explosion that used 300 kgs of explosives. And then the numbers came down to 3 kgs eventually, when the dust settled. Tragically, we lost 40 young soldiers at that moment. The next date I'll remind you of is May 2019. It was the time of elections, right? General elections, and an overwhelming parliamentary majority for the BJP. And it was something that, sort of has been talked about as being connected. And I will leave it at that. August 2019, the dismantling of the J&K state. I think that these three events in the region somehow, I think, started to unravel much of South Asia and what was going to happen in South Asia. The next date I'd like to bring to mind for all of you is May 2020, when China, for the first time since the 1950s, redefined its border dispute with India and did so by joining the line of actual control to the line of control, meaning that China somehow got immediately involved in the dispute over the state of J&K. And I think that this has had massive ramifications. We can go on to that in a bit. And then finally, August 2021, where there was a perceived power vacuum in Afghanistan, and powers, as they always do, like to sort of never have a vacuum. And so now, which we have a scenario which looks suspiciously like another phase of another Cold War, with its theater of operations this time being Central Asia to the north and South Asia to the south, instead of Eastern and Western Europe, of course, in Cold War I. I will leave aside what this means for Central Asia right now, and I will move on to South Asia, or I will discuss South Asia, because that is what pertains to us. In South Asia, it has resulted in a regional confrontation between economically and militarily now emerged, but authoritarian China aligned to Pakistan, and an economically evaporating, if that's the right word, India, but only nominally democratic India. So I think that this confrontation between India and China has taken place most prominently for us in Ladakh. The Chinese challenge has expanded, however, across the length of the Himalaya, and in the bargain, almost all the sovereign states with Himalayan interests, such as Bangladesh, Bhutan, Myanmar, and Nepal, are all facing north instead of south, meaning facing China instead of India, which was not, something which was something that was the opposite a few years ago. To me, what this means is the anticipation of a South Asia being forced to choose slowly between India and China in its own version of bipolarity, or even worse, and that's my third point, a dysfunctional South Asia with the entire length of the Himalaya being turned into a conflict zone for the foreseeable future. And I just want to pause here to tell you what that means. I mean, what that means for us who live in the Himalaya, or who are Himalayan, so to speak, across, because the Himalaya is a virtual cornucopia of wisdom, of methods, of all kinds of systems which haven't even been documented yet. And to have these turn into a conflict zone because of a rivalry between two, what has turned out to be now civilizational powers, is a very scary thought. And I just want to leave you with that thought because, and I want to stress that it began with Kashmir in 2019, where the proverbial stitch in time was not made. And now we have something which has basically unraveled, I think, and opened up to the entire world. I think, and an entire world in a manner where now suddenly 3 nuclear armed states are involved in the whole process, of are involved in some sort of conflict going on. The third nuclear armed state, of course, being Pakistan at this time. So it leaves us staring at, by us, I don't mean just us in Kashmir, certainly, or us in India only, but all of South Asia. And that, ladies and gentlemen, translates into 2 billion people. It's not just because India is, but no, I mean, South Asia is not India as such. You know, it's got, there are other sovereign countries here, and it involves the potential for 2 billion people, a population of 2 billion, being unable to have a clear voice in the affairs of the world, whether it be climatic, whether it be environmental, and all poverty and poverty alleviation, I think, and all these issues. And I think that this is something that should scare us all in South Asia and, quite frankly, in the world at large. So, and I say this not lightly, and I don't mean, I mean, this is something that I've been staring at, I think, arguably for the next sort of, I think, you know, I mean, for the past sort of 10 years or so, is what almost could be anticipated. Because if we have that, you know, and if we have the 2 largest states in Asia today, one claiming to be the largest democracy, the other not claiming to be a democracy and being authoritarian, but one moving towards authoritarian, staring at each other, you know, please understand what that spells for a person, you know, an ordinary person in this population of 2 billion. You know, it's something that I think should scare us all, number one, but it also needs to shake us in order to doing something to change it, you know. And this is happening in a climate, in an extraordinary climate, and that is that the world's largest population is being accused by somebody by the name of Gregory George Stanton, of being on the verge of genocide. I don't know how we got here. And with that, I'll stop, Vijay, and perhaps we could move on to the next portion of this.
Yeah, thank you, Siddiq Sahab. I know you had given me the right to interrupt, but I just did not want to, because it is both an eloquent flow of bringing together your experience as well as your academic analysis into it. साथ ही सिद्दीक साहब ने जो 3 साल एक टाइमलाइन बना के उन्होंने बताने का जो कोशिश किया, 2019 से लेके 3 साल, जहां हम लोग अगर पुलवामा से लेके शुरू करें, जहां नरेटिव्स की जो बात है, सच को जो ठोस पहुंचाता है, जिस तरीके से राजतंत्र इस इलाके, मतलब इस दक्षिण एशिया में, भारत में चला है, उसमें 300 किलो RDX की बात करके शुरू किया, और जब जांच खत्म होते है तो 3 किलो RDX तक पहुंचता है। उसके बाद एक पार्लियामेंट इलेक्शन होता है जिसमें एक थंबिंग मेजॉरिटी के साथ एक वही राजसत्ता वापस आता है बीजेपी के नेतृत्व में, मोदी के नेतृत्व में। वहां से इरादे बहुत साफ होते हैं। 2019 अगस्त में जो कश्मीर के साथ जो कांड एक तरीके से किया जा रहा है, जो संवैधानिक एक रिश्ता था, एक कमिटमेंट था कश्मीर को लेके, जम्मू कश्मीर के लोगों को लेके, वो तोड़ दिया जाता है। और फिर हम आते हैं मई 2020 में, जब चाइना अपने आप को कश्मीर के मसला कश्मीर में एक हिस्सेदार बनाता है, क्योंकि चाइना तय करता है कि लाइन ऑफ एक्चुअल कंट्रोल, LOAC जो बोलता है, उसको लाइन ऑफ कंट्रोल के साथ मिलाया जाए, और जिसको चाइनीज एग्रेशन के भाषा में इंडिया बताता है। तो वो शुरू हो जाता है। अगस्त 2021 तक आते आते अफगानिस्तान में जो एक सत्ता का परिवर्तन या बदलाव जो होता है, वहाँ एक नया सत्ता तालिबान के नेतृत्व में आता है। उसका सेंट्रल एशिया में जो भी असर हो उसको वहीं छोड़ता है, लेकिन दक्षिणी एशिया में अगर आप देखेंगे उसका असर क्या है, उसका मतलब क्या है, एक नया एक कोल्ड वॉर 2, जिसको सिद्दीक साहब बोल रहे हैं कोल्ड वॉर 2 के रूप में बहुत साथी लोग उसको मानते हैं। वो एक तानाशाह सरकार जो चाइना का है, और दूसरी तरफ अपने आप को बहुत पतला गणतंत्र या लोकतंत्र बनाते हुए जा रहा है। जो भारत का हालात है, वो चाइना एक तरीके से पाकिस्तान के साथ मिलिट्री तरीके में अलाइन होता है, वो बहुत साफ दिखता है। और बांग्लादेश से लेके, भूटान से लेके, म्यांमार से लेके तमाम देशों के बीच में, इंक्लूडिंग श्रीलंका, जो उत्तर की तरफ देखने का उनका एक रिश्तों का बदलाव होता है, जो इस इलाकों में दक्षिणी एशिया में पहले नहीं हुआ कभी। तो उस तरह का एक अचानक परिवर्तन हो जाता है इस सरकार का विदेशी रिश्तों को देखते हुए। तो वो इन देशों के बीच में एक ये मुद्दा आ जाता है, मजबूरी आ जाता है कि वो चाइना या इंडिया किसी को चुनने के स्थिति में आ जाता है। तो वो ये मामला सिर्फ भारत का 133 करोड़ लोगों का मामला नहीं है, या भारत और पाकिस्तान का लोगों का मामला नहीं है। ये 200 करोड़ जो लोग दक्षिणी एशिया में रहते हैं, हम सबका मामला है। क्योंकि एक तरीके से उनका बोलना ये है कि हम एक बहुत हिंसक और एक बहुत द्वंद्व में फंसे हुए एक भविष्य की तरफ देखने के लिए मजबूर हो रहा है इस समय में। हमारा अपना एक आवाज बनाने का जो कोशिश होना चाहिए था इस समय में, पर्यावरण के मुद्दों को लेते हुए या जलवायु परिवर्तन के मुद्दों को लेते हुए, ग्लोबल स्तर पे अमन का मामलों को लेते हुए, वो हम गवा रहा है इस मसलों में जूझते हुए, ऐसे सिद्दीक साहब का कहना भी है। To all the audience, I would request that we stay on. This conversation has been very, very fruitful and important. I definitely would like to pose certain questions to Professor Siddiq Wahid. Also because militarization has come with a lot of cost, but at the same time, militarization has been consistent in South Asia. I mean, you look at Pakistan, you look at Sri Lanka, the war that has been fought against one population of the people. You look at Myanmar, the way in which militarization has completely kind of taken apart the country, its people, in more than one way. You look at India in terms of its internal conflict management, its external conflict management, its relationships with the conflict zones and people, its commitments that it has foregone, be it in Naga peace process or in Kashmir, etc., etc., especially with a more conservative, regressive government, authoritarian government coming into existence. Who have been the real beneficiaries of militarization in that sense?
I think there have been several. I mean, there are many, obviously, but I think that the first is that the beneficiary has been the Westphalian sort of world order state system. Because what has happened through this militarization is a confirmation of the state, which is permitted. It is the only sort of legitimately permitted entity to use violence, and so I think it has helped them along, and in fact confirmed the Westphalian state system. And I say this because I think that in 1991 and 92, when the old Cold World Order broke down, there was an opportunity to look at a new system, especially because it reflected a sort of coming home of the or a some sort of a climax of crises in the former colonial states, and the need to sort of re-look at it. We lost that opportunity. So I think that the Westphalian state system was the first to benefit from it. The other one, of course, was the weapons supplier states, and just staying with ourselves in South Asia for the moment. I think that France, Israel, the United States, and China. I mean, China supplying arms to Myanmar and Pakistan, have benefited from it. And to say weapons supplier state is to say corporate entities, and it's not completely by accident that the first sort of endorsement of the BJP as the ruling faction, or for the ruling faction headed by Prime Minister Modi, was done prior to the 2014 elections, was stated by Ratan Tata, and not, it wasn't a political endorsement by a party, it was a corporate endorsement and things. So I think that you can say weapons sale supplier states or corporate entities were the ones who benefited from the militarization. And finally, I must also say that India and Pakistan, in the context of Kashmir, became beneficiaries, I think, for this, because the language that they have talked is the language of territory rather than peoples, and in terms of a resolution of the dispute. And because of that, they tacitly were endorsed in these positions by, I think, all the greater powers, such as the US, China, European Union, even the UK, which is hardly power now, but, so even the UK endorses this, which leaves the peoples who are directly affected by this in the lurch. And I think that Kashmir, I use it as an illustration. I think it applies to Myanmar, it applies to Pakistan itself, and so forth. So I think that is, those are the key elements that I think benefited from it.
Yeah, thank you, Siddiq साहब. आपने बताया कि मतलब जो वेस्टफेलियन सिस्टम से लेके जो आर्म्स प्रोवाइड करता है, आर्म्स सप्लाई करता है, खास करके आपने नाम लिया फ्रांस, इसराइल, यूएस, चाइना वगैरह का, और जो एक किस्म का एक सिस्टम कायम रखने के लिए किन किन को उससे मदद मिलता है उसके बारे में. I just wanted to bring ask you also as a historian and analyst, how do you see the future of these conflicts? You've also heard the Naga story, the Kashmir story. You have been part of it. You have been living it in so many ways. Also coming with the kind of internal polarizations and divisions that has been done between the three regions of Kashmir that has been witnessed. How do you see a transformation happening? A transformation, do you see that as a possibility? A people-oriented peace emanating in a certain sense. I don't mean governments and this alone. I see it also as a vision and a statement.
Yeah, I think, you do have to hope for sort of a change of some sort. And I don't think that that there's anybody who doesn't hope for this. But frankly, I don't see such a transformation taking place when we view the current leadership. Let's use that euphemism for those who lead us today. And I think that what needs to happen is some sort of a movement that you might want to term, a people's movement of some sort, that would, that would throw up a leadership that is completely different from this. Now that, I think, will have to be an axial event. I mean, it's not going to happen, I think, tomorrow or day after. I think that it is, I think we are stuck in some sort of a quagmire, where the convergence of big business and big government has coalesced so tightly with surveillance as the third, that something will have to break it. I'm not quite sure what it's going to be. I'm an historian. I cannot predict and cannot pretend to predict. But something has to give in that context. And I don't know how and when that will happen, but it will. And we are talking about a region that houses a population of 2 billion and neighbors a population of another 2 billion and plus, so we're talking about a population of 4 billion in total, a demography of 4 billion in total. That's a chunkable size of the world, and I mean, a sizable chunk of the world it is. And it's something that we need to contemplate as to how that will take place. I don't know.
Thank you. And I'm seeing this very interesting chats that are going on in the chat box simultaneously. Request friends to read it. Siddiq Saab, I mean, I think आपने ये बताया कि मतलब एक उम्मीदवार भविष्य के बारे में बात करना थोड़ा जल्दी हो जाएगा, क्योंकि इसमें जब तक क्योंकि जिस तरह का राजसत्ताओं को हम देख रहा है उसमें ये मुमकिन हो पाएगा वो भी असंभव लगता है कभी-कभी। आपने ये भी बताया कि there is a need for a people's movement, एक लोग जन आंदोलन का उस तरीके का एक जरूरत है, या एक जन क्रांति का एक जरूरत है। There is a need for a people's revolution, if I may call it that, that has to fundamentally change the structure of and as a friend from Kashmir said, until unless, I mean, there is a need for us also to coexist and learn to live together in a certain sense beyond the nationalistic, militaristic boundaries and borders that have been created. I just want to ask you, I mean, I'm just rushing through this. Where do you see the enhancement of mutual solidarities? I mean, also because when one is talking about Kashmir, for instance, or Naga areas, for instance, the Indian civil society always struggles with the fact that, we are so caught up in our own set of battles and our own struggles and our own release campaigns and, human rights defenders who are getting in each area there is this going on. How do you think we can spin a new wave of mutual solidarities amidst this chaos, amidst this real crisis? I mean, I don't think it's that a certain section of the Indian civil society or human rights movement does not want to look at Kashmir or does not want to look at Naga areas or does not want to prioritize what is happening in Chhattisgarh, etc. Be it the women's movement, be it the trade union movement, be it the peasants movement, be it the agriculture workers movement or the forest unions or the fish workers. Each one has been given such handful of battles to fight for their own living, their own existence, their own basic life, that mutual solidarity has become a challenging point. Do you see a chance for us in this? I mean, in this whole quagmire that you mentioned.
It depends on how you prioritize your problems. And clearly in South Asia, the prioritization of the problems has been with politics sort of having a very secondary position, and the economics having a very sort of upfront position, which is not to say an equitable position, but it's just that economics makes for good sloganeering and politicians have used it and it's gone. So what has been ignored, I think, is that and in that context, I would say that when the Soviet Union collapsed, we know that it collapsed because there was an economic rot within the Soviet Union. I'm not so sure that there is that in South Asia. I think economically, it's a sizable chunk of the world's economy, and it will rumble along. What has set in is a political rot. And in political rots, what you have to understand is, that how do we help our neighbors, and not just how do we help our neighbors in Sri Lanka or in Bangladesh or in other places, but even within, And I think that Kashmir is a sad example of being the vanguard of all experimentation towards centralization and towards massive centralization, betrayal of the federal system, that was supposedly there, and existed. And Kashmir being on the vanguard of that, and that I think in the last 3 years has been practiced with massive speed on the other parts of India as well, So, and I don't know, I don't know where this is going in terms of, especially if we continue to see it, or if we continue to let it be propounded as a civilizational confrontation, which is the case with the present government, right? To show it as a civilizational confrontation, in which case, you know, again, all of South Asia is going to be involved. And if at the forefront of this civilizational confrontation is going to be Muslims and Hindus, then we need to bear in mind that there are about 600 million Muslims in South Asia, you know, not the 200 that we talk about in India, you know, and that again reverts to the very, very scary picture that one is forced to contemplate. And listen, I mean, you know, I'm not a pessimist, nor am I an optimist for that matter. You know, I just like to try and call it as I see it, you know, and this is something that I think, I mean, this Cold War business, or the return of the new Cold War, is something that I can say I said because I wrote about it about 10 years ago, and said, hey, this seems to be returning to the Cold War. And that was only 2 decades after the collapse of the last Cold War, with all this talk about initially, for a very brief time, unipolar world, and then a multipolar world, you know, but it very quickly returned to a bipolar world as we see it today, you know, and that is something that, you know, we need to contemplate, you know, and see what implications it has for South Asia and the world in general.
Thank you, Siddiq Saab. I mean, I'm also looking at the time, and it's actually 8:26, already 26 minutes beyond the 6 to 8 schedule we had kept. But I think it has been a fantastic conversation. But also, I wanted to ask you, there are a lot of questions that came in the chat box, and I just mentioned in the chat itself that, you know, we may not be able to take up most of the questions.
Well, please send it to me by email.
Yeah, we will definitely do that, because it'll be good to have some of these friends, and NAPM and all of us are together committed. I mean, as Pak India Forum, for surely we have been thinking about, we will be speaking to you also to design a series of conversations to understand Jammu, Kashmir, Ladakh, I mean, regions, interact with the people as much as we can, even if it means developing a small team of people who can actually understand these issues better from a different generation, and look at these issues more closely and with more intrinsic solidarities built into this. Siddiq Saab, thank you for the time that you gave, but I would definitely come back to you for a round of concluding comments from your side too. Friends, so, you know, there is a wide-ranging set of questions that have been already posed. एक तो ये कि कश्मीर में जो recent developments, delimitation, democratic altercation वगैरह को लेके है, कश्मीर में लोग कैसे आगे बढ़ते हुए एक अपना आमदनी बढ़ाने के लिए सरप्लस प्रोडक्शन खेती में, एग्रीकल्चर में कैसे किया जाए, उसको लेके है। बहुत तमाम कमेंट्स आए हैं साथियों का, जिसमें भारत के जो लोकतंत्र को लेके जो सवाल है, उसमें हमें क्या बदलाव लाने की जरूरत है। आयशा, अविनाश, सुअलाल जंगू, अशोकदा ने लगातार एक हिम्मत बढ़ाने के तरफ और लोगों का एक पीपल्स कोalition, पीपल्स अलायंस की बात किया है। सिद्दीक साहब ने, जैसे आप लोगों ने सुना है, उन्होंने कभी भी एक देश का, एक राष्ट्र का बात नहीं किया है इस बातचीत में। उन्होंने हमेशा दक्षिणी एशिया का जो बात रखा है, जहां हम उमर को भी मतलब बेला को भी सुन रहे हैं या बाकी साथियों को भी सुन रहा है, तो उसमें भी हमारा एक बहुत साफ एक नजरिया निकल के आता है कि ये जो जंग ए आजादी जो लड़े जा रहा है, the battle for freedom of communities, of people, what does it mean for those of us who may be in despair ourselves for the kind of freedoms that we are losing, but at the same time, what does it mean to provide stronger mutual solidarity? So उस तरीके के सवाल है। डॉक्टर अरुण शो नालुंग उखरुल से, मणिपुर से, उन्होंने सवाल पूछा है। नागा साथी ने, अफ्स्पा अभी भी क्यों है नॉर्थ ईस्ट के तमाम जगहों में, और इस तरह का एक दुनिया का बहुत बड़ा लोकतंत्र का बात जब भारत बार बार करता है तो फिर ये अफस्पा क्यों है अभी भी। और उन्होंने ये भी पूछा है कि सरकार एक मतलब नागास के साथ 25 साल से जो बातचीत कर रहा है, लेकिन क्यों सरकार का कोई कमिटमेंट नहीं है इसको एक मीनिंगफुल कंक्लूजन में, मतलब इसको इस लड़ाई को खत्म करने के लिए सरकार का एक कमिटमेंट क्यों नहीं है। एनी नमला जी, तमाम साथियों ने इसमें भाग लिया है। मैं चाहूंगा कि हम इस चैट बॉक्स को ही एक उसमें रखें, लेकिन I want to bring all the 4 speakers onto the spotlight now and make sure that all of you get a few concluding lines. इसमें summarize करने के लिए कुछ है नहीं, लेकिन उससे पहले मैं चाहूंगा कि साथी तपन अभी भी इधर अगर है, तपन बोस, तपन जी से मैं आग्रह करूंगा कि वो 2 मिनट अपना बात रखें। ऐसे कुछ साथी हैं जिन्होंने कश्मीर के मुद्दे में, नागा पीस प्रोसेस के मामलों में, असम के मामलों में वगैरह बहुत सालों से उन्होंने जो काम किया है, और उन साथियों का उन साथियों का जो अनुभव जो है जिंदगी का, उसमें से गौतम बिल्कुल मतलब गौतम नवलखा, तपन बोस, प्रोफेसर दिनेश मोहन, रीता मनचंदा, सुहासिनी मुले, एक पूरा एक जनरेशन है भारत में जो साथियों ने इन मुद्दों को एक लड़ाई के रूप में बदलने का कोशिश किया था, और एक सिविल सोसाइटी का इन्वॉल्वमेंट, सॉलिडारिटी के रूप में बदलने का। तपन, इफ यू आर hearing me, could you switch on, could you bring on your video as well? I can
can you hear me?
Yeah, we know that we have overshot time. You've been all through here in this conversation, but definitely wanted to hear from you.
No,
I wanted you to summarize the thoughts.
No, you don't have to apologize for overshooting the time. It's been a very, very interesting conversation and very useful. To correct you first, Vijayan, it's not I who have been trying to, or has been trying to, revolutionize or take any movement forward. I've been following movements of people. My contribution has always been in following people. And what I found, what the Indian Army or the Pakistan Army had done in Bangladesh, which I had recorded as a young journalist at the age of 25 in 71 Bangladesh, I found a reputation of similar atrocities by Indian Army and Indian security forces in Nagaland and subsequently in Punjab and Kashmir. And then I look back and we forget, and often it is not known, that Indian Army was also involved in tackling the Naxalite upsurge in West Bengal at a very early phase. So for me, this character of the state, whether it's Pakistan, India, or present-day Bangladesh or Sri Lanka, is not very different. So I saw these struggles of people, and I've tried in my own way to document it, to understand, and to explain through writing to people. What Siddiq said is very important. We need to take into consideration and recognize, those of us who are concerned, that by removing Article 370 and changing the state structure of the state of Jammu and Kashmir, BJP has actually achieved the opposite of what they have been trying to do, is that it's not an international matter, it's an internal matter. It has actually become an internationalized the Kashmir situation. And the first fallout, as we have seen, is the direct involvement of China. And it will expand. And also, but what Siddiq did not mention is that China's response to India also to a large extent guided by the present regime's closeness to the Americans and being a part of the Quad. So it's all integrated. I mean, it's not just the Second Cold War. I think BJP has achieved to bringing us closer to the Cold War than any other regime has done in the past. And that is something we have to take into cognizance. Because if we get to see a war between the US and China, which many analysts are worried about, we will really be in great trouble. In case of Nagaland, see, I mean, I have been watching the peace process rather closely for a long time. The issue of the flag and the constitution is not a very important issue even for a nationalist, but it becomes symbolically very important for the Naga, and is also similarly very, very important for the BJP, because they see it as something of diluting their commitment to nationalism, which is why they removed the flag and the constitution of Nagaland. And they were not given, even though the framework agreement inter alia in a way agrees that these rights are a part of the agreement, because it says, it admits that it's an agreement between two entities. But they won't give it today. They cannot give it today. Because recognizing a state to have, or a community to have, or a region to have its own flag and constitution is not acceptable to the Indian capitalist class. You know who were the first to have congratulated Modi for removal of Article 370? The business community. They were the first. It was the Tatas and Adanis and Ambanis who congratulated. It's a part of the record. So, it's not, because these are areas where they are yet to exploit all the natural resources and for the expansion of Indian capitalism, which is a part of global capitalism. So for this particular regime, which is more closer to corporate than the Congress was, perhaps, not very. Anyway, I mean, let's not go into that debate. But for this regime to accept anything that the corporate interest does not want is not going to happen. They have extended the corporate interest into the region of Kashmir. Do you think they're going to roll it back from Nagaland? I'm sorry, no. And this is a reality that we have to understand and we have to keep in our mind when we continue with our struggle, and we have to understand how do we fight it. And it cannot be the fight of only the Nagas and the Kashmiris. It has to be the fight of all the exploited classes of the subcontinent. And we got to be able to link it. We got to be able to link the struggles with the people's struggle in Chhattisgarh, in Bastar, and explain and understand and internalize the political strategy in linking the strategy of the struggle. And unless we are able to do that, I don't think we'll be able to move very much forward with the regional struggles. Because the ruling class, and particularly the state, knows how to manage conflict. They love conflict. Capitalism thrives on inequality. We're talking about 1%. Look at America, how they have managed inequality for all these years. the Indian capitalists are new in the game. So we have to understand that conflicts are something that the ruling class needs. Because through these kind of conflicts, they're able to split and create a fragmented consciousness of people's struggle.
Thank you, Tapan. As you speak, I see Chiani, Nasreen shaking her head affirmatively with a smile, also realizing when you're saying that, there you go. She's on the spotlight too. Realizing that, this is something that the ruling class, or the capitalists have enjoyed over a period of time, be it, be it the support to the Hitlers of the world or the Modis now, or the rest of it. I think there is an inherent alliance that is built, and to break that, there has to be newer alliances, as you said, whether it is between the people of Chhattisgarh, between the different communities that are impacted by. Chiani, Nasreen, any quick takes from you?
Actually, I think Tapan has said most of the things that I wanted to say, but I think that there's certain things that we're still a little loath to talk about, the nitty-gritty. We don't name, we don't name fascism. We don't, and why can't the people? We are a forum for the people of India and Pakistan and the region. So when we're talking about, say, class struggle, why not across borders as well? And certainly within India, the great fault lines are religion, they are class, they are caste, and it is capitalism and militarism, which is, ruling supreme at the moment. So yes, but what do we do and how do we do it?
Yeah, indeed. That's an important challenge, and I think काफी कोशिश एक समय में रहा सिविल सोसाइटी के माध्यम से, जन आंदोलनों के माध्यम से, from people's movements and groups also, to build this or interweave these solidarities in a certain sense, where one is able to stand with the other, one is able to express solidarities and continue strengthening each other in the path of the struggle. And I think that's something that's brilliant. Thank you, Chiani, for joining us. I would want all our panelists to be brought back. Siddiq Saab had a doctor's appointment, so Siddiq Saab just shot me a message saying that he had to leave. But Rosemary, Sathi from Kashmir, Bela, all of you, I don't want to be summarizing this. I think Tapan definitely helped us in summarizing some of these thoughts. He has been someone who has been a co-traveler, and even when I said that in a leadership capacity, I didn't mean it as an individual. I meant it as a collective of community, a group of people who built solidarities. And building solidarity is an act of political commitment and affirmation in itself, because to build people together, be it on the question of Kashmir, also bringing together the people of Pakistan and India over the last 3 decades has not been an easy task, but also be it the interventions in the Naga peace process, Northeast, other regions, the conflicts that have been there, as I was saying earlier, if Gautam is in jail on the Bhima Koregaon issue, definitely the state's understanding is very clear that there are voices need to be silenced because they are understanding this architecture of violence and militarization. जो समझ गए उनको अंदर कर दो, ये बहुत पुराना तरीका भी रहा है. Let's start in the reverse order. Bela, quick comments from you.
Just one or two thoughts which are coming to my mind. One, I fully agree that we have to have stronger alliances across different regions, and because there is a great interconnectedness between all of what is happening within Bastar. I would like to see somehow that we need to make a dent in the criminal justice system, because it's become like here, it's like a parody. And we need independent agencies here because, the kind of large scale human rights violations that we have seen here, as well as in other conflict regions of the country, somehow hum log justice, we don't see just enough justice. Like we would like to see, for example, for fake encounters, we would like fake encounters to end. We would like, command responsibility, respect for command responsibility. Policemen should, there should be FIRs against policemen and so on. But, ये सब कुछ नहीं हो रहा है. So somewhere I feel that किस तरह से हम ये, independent agencies हो, जो investigate करें, जो cognizance में ले, how do we try to ensure that? Because as of now, as we know, we are dependent on the same state machinery, and ultimately then literally the head of police, who is part of the whole story, of the violation for that matter, it comes back to them, in order for them to act on behalf of people, which then they don't do that. So somewhere we need to find a way to break this. So how do we do that? And one thought was also coming to my mind, the example of Yesh Kavul in Palestine. I was very impressed by this, by the Yesh Kavul soldiers who were members of the IDF, but who refused to serve in the occupied territories, saying that we are for the defense of Israel and not to occupy other people's lands and territories. And I think somewhere we need to make that kind of a dent in our armed forces, in our policing. We need to imagine an India with limited, जहाँ पुलिस कम से कम हो, पुलिस का काम कम से कम हो, military का काम कम से कम हो. I mean, ideally, we would like to see a world, South Asia and the world where we don't need people, even, all these soldiers, even in the borders. Because आज हम बस्तर में देख रहे हैं किस तरह से, the tension within the forces, often it doesn't come out either. But, we have had so many instances where CRPF forces have opened fire on their own comrades, for example. So इस तरह के कई examples हैं हमारे पास में. And these are also people from, very ordinary families who are again, there for employment. So everybody is just following orders, you see. नीचे से मतलब सब कोई order ही follow कर रहे हैं, and system इस तरह से चल रहा है. So somewhere an idea of India with, where policing is less, need of paramilitary is less, and how do we achieve that? I don't know, but I think somewhere we need to
but
make
also what
a
you
dent.
said, but also what
Yeah.
you said is,
Yeah.
how do we convert our aspirations for justice and peace?
Yes, yeah.
In a certain theoretical sense is very important. Rose, comments
Yes.
from you on that?
Yeah.
I mean, also feel free to respond to any questions that you saw in the chat, etc. But otherwise, we can.
Yeah, thank you, Vijayan. I really must thank the Alliance for bringing us together. It's been interesting listening to everyone. And one is Tapan's remarks, which is actually very true. But I think I've always been an optimist in the midst of all this, pessimism and violence and militarization that we see in our land. An offer of the flag being a cultural flag actually was offered, but we are talking of a political flag and not the Naga flag being used as a cultural flag. The government of India really needs to be serious to see that the ceasefire doesn't break. If the ceasefire breaks, then I don't think we are talking of South Asia. We are looking across the other side. So there are a lot of possibilities happening, and that's the seriousness of it. I would also request our Indian friends, especially from the civil society and even from across the borders, that we are all in this together. We have had your support all these years, many of you whom I see here this evening, Kashmiri friends, with whom the Kashmiri mothers also have had great relationships with the Sri Lankan mothers too. I think it is time for us to really bring changes within the governance system and within the leadership as well. I really wouldn't like to be as pessimistic as to think that the leadership will not listen anymore. I think situations will come where the government of India, the leaders that man this government, will be forced to listen. And who do they listen to? They will definitely listen to people's voices. I think we have seen the farmers' movement and the changes that were possibilities of people's voices coming to the fore. Stanton's remarks on Kashmir and Assam seeing a genocide, a warning India of really seeing a genocide. I think he probably has not realized that now we actually have a genocidal history without the gas chamber. And I think it is important for people's movements also to share with each other, especially to also listen to our Northeast stories, maybe of Manipur, of Nagaland, of Kashmir, the fake encounters that the Indian army has staged in our lands. The kind of atrocities that are committed, which are in violations of any kinds of human rights. The rapes inside the churches, the murders, the killings. Until date, we have not seen any justice. Whether it's the Oinam, Operation Bluebird, whether it is, so many incidents of massacres over the years, we have not seen any justice. And I would also like to refer to what Bela had said of justice. Without justice, we cannot have peace. And even if we are looking towards peace, there has to be justice on perpetrators, on also the understanding that truth must be told. For so long, we have actually not been able to tell each other, the true stories. And I think it's important to have these kind of conversations. And I'm really grateful to all of you for listening. Looking forward to conversing with you further. And Bela, it's good to meet you after so many years. I remember you came to Nagaland on the Armed Forces Special Powers Act issue with Sharmila there. And Bela and Vani had actually stayed in my house in Nagaland. So good to see you. I don't know after how many years, but thank you, Vijayan. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Rose. And it's indeed good to see both of you in the same panel, speaking here with NAPM and other friends. Over to you, Sati. I mean, you've also heard the different narratives, and I think I'm eternally grateful to Rose for her life, her contributions. I mean, along with her, several other comrades like that who hold that fire of optimism in them, despite the extreme violence and tears that they have had to live through. But I also see a point of almost a point of no return when, in the words of Siddiq and in what our friend from Kashmir said. Over to you for your concluding words too.
For me, I think I'd first like to thank everyone. It's been a great opportunity to listen to Professor Rosemary and Bela and Professor Siddiq as always, and you, Vijay. The inspirational moment was Tapanda. I noticed that he had oxygen in nasal cannula and he's still talking to us, and he was talking about 1971 when he was 25. So he's well into his 70s and he's still here. He's still, fighting this battle. So I'd just like to say in conclusion, we are here, all of us together. We have chosen this battle. We have decided to fight for what's right. It's a long battle. All we can do is stick to our guns and fight as long as we can, and fight as long as we are alive. It's I see light at the end of the tunnel. I see that probably a day may come where we may get what we are asking for, because it is right, it is legitimate, and it is just. And as long as our demands remain so, I'm sure we'll achieve them. And thank you very much, and good night, and have a lovely year ahead.
Yeah, indeed. Meaningful it should be, and challenging it will be. They will make sure that it is challenging, and we will make sure it is meaningful. That's what I can hope and wish for everybody in 2022. Health be good. Well, let's hope that we are all, I mean, probably we are done with this year's COVID round already. Our rituals are over. Bela just, I mean, I can see her coughing on the screen. She just is barely recovering. So we might need health experts from the different parts of the world to come and help many of our activists to just to make sure that we are all around to take forward these struggles. Thank you all very much, and at least for giving me this opportunity to NAPM, but of course also that all of you weaved into it extremely nicely and cordially into this, and helped us make this a very, very rich and to a certain extent also very nuanced conversation. I think this has been an amazing evening for me in terms of my own learnings. I hope it has been so for all the participants and audience. My apologies for not being able to take up questions like in a better moderator should have done. But I really thought it important that we start this conversation, and I'm committing myself to making sure that we have more conversations, as I said, on the specifics of some of these issues, but also bringing together friends. Thank you, Ramuda, Ramuda and Lolly, for the suggestion that it's probably Jan 30th can be a day that we can think of many actions, many conversations to be taken forward. Several other occasions. I mean, also because this regime definitely celebrates January 30th as a day of their first victory, probably. And then we have reasons to make sure that we denounce those celebrations and make sure that we celebrate and the value and the life of Gandhi, but also the value of non-violence, the value of the battle for freedom, which he affirmed. And the Nagas definitely have a special place for Gandhi in your history also, because he's probably the only courageous Indian leader who stood up at that time and said that if the Nagas want me to be a guest in your land, I will be happily so. And if the Nagas want to be part of India, I will be more than happy. But if they want me to be a guest in your land, I will happily oblige, and I'll be the first one to give my life for that battle. He was not allowed to stay on, and he was not allowed to stay on in the picture precisely for these kind of positions where he understood people over territories. And I think that's a important message for us to take forward. Thank you all very much, and thanks to NAPM friends. Arundhati, over to you and others in NAPM. Thank you very much from my end.
Thank you, Vijayan, and thank you all of you, and from Bela, the old friend, Professor Rosemary, and Dr. Siddiq. Thank you, Vijayan, and thank you all of you. Is a very, very part of this all collective struggle. The only thing on the behalf of NAPM we can say that we all know freedom is a constant struggle, and it is in this collectiveness we find the reservoirs of hope and optimism. And with that hope, we all will go forward. I'd just like to share one small thing about, I remember our friend, my colleague and my comrade from Narmada Bachao Andolan, बुद्धि बेन को गैंगरेप हुआ था गुजरात पुलिस के द्वारा, और उसी के कुछ दिनों के बाद छत्तीसगढ़ में शंकर गुहा नियोगी की हत्या हुई। बुद्धि बेन को हमारे सबके साथ जाना था। रास्ते में उसको एक पुलिस वाले ने पूछा कि तुम तो अपनी केस हारने जा रही हो, वहां छत्तीसगढ़ किसकी लड़ाई लड़ने जा रहे हो, क्या रिश्ता नाता है तुम्हारा? शी सेड कि जो चांद सितारा मैं यहाँ से माखड़खेड़ा से देखती हूँ, वही चांद वो छत्तीसगढ़ से देखते हैं, वो मेरा रिश्ता है, वो कभी कोई तोड़ नहीं सकता। आई थिंक विद दैट होप, विद दैट ऑप्टिमिज्म एंड विद दैट ट्रेन we are there. We all assure that it is our responsibility. मुझे तो कुछ बातें सुनते हुए नजर से आंख झुक रही थी शर्म से कि कितने एक नेशनलिज्म के अल्टर के ऊपर हमने पूरे लोगों के ड्रीम्स को और पूरे वॉर इकोनॉमी को जन्म दिया है। So you trust us. There are allies everywhere. We are there. And thank you for many of the veterans, especially Lolly, Ramu, Umadi, जो हर जीवी में हमारे साथ रहते हैं और हर जीवी में अगली जीवी करने की हमको ताकत देते हैं। Thanks a lot, and we hope to see you on next Sunday at 6 p.m. with another struggle, another लड़ने की कहानी और हमारे कलेक्टिव संघर्ष को आगे लेके जाने की तैयारी के साथ। जिंदाबाद, जय भीम, सबतरंगी सलाम सभी साथियों।